The following program does not have a normal intro because I was really too busy smoothing other things over to get it done. So, Ori, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. Tonight's show is a little different from my normal fare in that as you're likely aware, I'm bringing on a guest today. And I think that this is an important story that has gotten some fair share of media attention, but has not really gotten a proper share when we consider its context, both with respect to Zachariah Anderson individually, as well as the specter of the greater impact that this type of justice can have on each and every one of us, and reflection of where things are starting to go seemingly wrong with our justice system. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring in Zachariah Anderson's brother, Solomon, and I'm going to share with those of you who may not be familiar with the Zachariah Anderson story. We'll give you some details. I'm also going to try and provide some new information for those of you who have been following this case very closely. So, without further ado, I'm going to say, welcome to the show, Solomon. How are you?
Doing all right. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, first things first, if you can give us like a little background about you and perhaps your family growing up with Zachariah, like your nature of your relationship going back even as far back as childhood.
Absolutely. So in the 80s, my parents separated before I was born. I was born and for the 5 years after that, we were primarily with my mother. She left in 1989 and left us with our dad. She told us to leave the house and walk to the curb and wait. And then she told us to get off her lawn. So we were walking down the road when my dad showed up and picked us up. From that point, my elder two brothers and I were galvanized together. It was the three of us that grew up very closely with my father as a single father for a great portion of our childhood. So if it means anything to you, my eldest brother Josh, Zach, and I were like the three musketeers, or if you watched, was it DuckTales, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, like the three ducklings. Like
Well,
we were just like bound together by those kinds of experiences. We very very much raised each other, as well as with my dad's oversight, but a lot of it we had to figure out on our own, and with that came a lot of trauma bonding, as people do in those situations. So Zach was, the middle brother in that. We, of course, fought like brothers do, like cats and dogs.
can you give
But
me a breakdown the age disparity between the three of
Yeah,
you?
so Josh is 5 years older than me, and
Mm,
Zach is 4 years older than me. My next
okay.
older brother, Aaron, died in 1982, I believe. So he wasn't around, but then it was me. So I was born in 84, and they were born in 79 and 80. So so the lot of us grew up very closely together, and whatever mischief that we had gotten into as children, we generally got into together. Um, and there was a very clear bond between us. That meant that Zach, as I've stated before, taught me to drive. He was the one that was someone that gave me advice, to listen to me when something was going wrong. He was always there for me for all of those really important moments. Like as a confidant, as a guide, as an older brother. Josh too, but Zach specifically was the one that I tend to meld with the closest to.
Mhm.
So go ahead.
No, so I mean, it gives me a little bit of context to your background, and also why it is that I know you've appeared on several shows, and you're obviously, it's one thing for someone to be a sibling. Different siblings have different nature of relationship. I can understand why it is that you sort of feel like they because you seem to be like very dedicated, perhaps more than many other siblings would be, toward calling the public's attention to this injustice. And I want to commend you for that, because it has nobility on multiple levels. First, with respect to on a personal level, as far as sticking up for your brother, but it also with respect to the message that this has really for all Americans to be concerned about, because as we're going to see as we're discussing this case, it's frightening to hear the scant evidence that was presented to a jury, which ended up leading into a conviction, which this is a life-altering conviction. The final sentence that he faced, we'll have a spoiler alert here. Just remind me, the final sentence that he ended up getting at the end of
50 years.
50 years.
Yes.
That's his life. That's his whole life right there.
Yeah, he's currently 42. They gave him 50 years, which meant that he was eligible for parole at 89 years old.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, and when you consider the level of evidence, and we're going to get into this, we're going to boil this down, but I want you to help walk us through, and I'm going to be forthright with the audience as I explained to you before the show here. So I definitely read up about the Zachariah Anderson story, and I watched really a tiny portion of the trial itself. I was joining Legal Vices when he was streaming it. I joined him once or twice, but for I'm a total of an hour or two. So there's dozens of hours of testimony that I haven't seen at all. And that's why I'm hoping that for those who might be in my position, who have a relatively limited knowledge of what happened and where things started going wrong and where they continued unfolding in the result that ended up actually unfolding here, I'm hoping that you can walk us through it so that we can get a better feel for exactly why we should all feel impassioned about the injustice that happened to your brother.
Okay? I mean, for context's sake, things were going wrong from the day that he was arrested. So
before we get there,
yeah, right.
If you can give us in broad parameters the nature of relationship that he had with Sadie, so that we can get so that everyone here can understand, when did he first meet her, from what was the nature of that relationship and the children that they had, etc. So this way people can start getting to know, how Zachariah's life began, slowly walked into this scenario.
So at the time, he and Sadie were together 12 years. So almost 13 years at the time of his arrest.
Starting in around, when is this?
Let's see. So that's 2008. 2008, roughly, is when they started dating.
Okay.
So, I mean, they've been together for a bunch of time. It's a lot of time that they spent together. There was a bunch of times where they were on and off. He traveled quite a bit for work. They had some issues with that. She generally had jealousy of him talking to other women over those years. There were some issues that had come out of those situations, but rarely did it escalate to anything extreme. I think there was a point in, I want to say, around 2018, give or take, that she started to push his buttons a little bit more. She was like begging him into a fight. She was calling the police on him. She was doing things like that to try and set a narrative, and play the victim with the police when they would show up to the point where I think in 2019, she had stolen about $3,000 and taken her best friend on vacation with her. So you have a relationship where he worked, she stayed with the children, she had a job, she had a profession, but for the most part, he just went to earn as much money as he could to try and provide for their children. They had two more kids in, oh man, how old? Let's see, in December of 2015. So they had twin boys in December of 2015, and there seemed to be a turn in their relationship after that. It started to fall apart at a more rapid rate.
And their oldest child is a girl who is how old?
Currently, she's 15.
Okay.
So
so they must have known each other going back to 2007 or so.
Something like that.
It's okay. So it's not a test. I'm certainly not looking at test you on the years and stuff like that. It's also not your personal relationship. So when they started, It might be something that you might not be aware of. But but she was born roughly 2007, 2008, and they so okay, and she ended up actually testifying at trial. I actually saw her testimony. So
Yep.
although I think they kept her off camera, as I recall. I'm not sure. I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember. I think
that's
they
correct.
kept her off camera. Yeah.
As a
So
minor witness at the time, she was 14, and that was one of the requests of the court, was to make sure that she was never put on camera.
mhm. So you're saying the relationship started getting rocky around 2018, and they were never married. Just to be clear here, they were just like they were just dating, and I guess boyfriend girlfriend type of thing. And they never got engaged or anything of that nature, right?
That's correct. Yeah, they had never gotten engaged. I think that there was a point that, Zach had explained to me that Sadie's best friend Rebecca Jekyll, the one that was that was pulled on the witness stand,
Mm,
when Rebecca got divorced, it seemed to be a shiv in their relationship. Rebecca seemed to want to compete for Sadie's attention, and it was just not something that Zach was interested in maintaining in the relationship. Is either that Sadie wanted to be with him, or she wanted to be best friends with Rebecca. He wasn't really wanting to like have a relationship where he was dating, Sadie and Rebecca in sort of a tertiary way. Like
mhm.
it was not a comfortable place for him because Rebecca is not exactly a good influence. She was, she had
It
her
was
own
toxic to
issues
their
and connections.
relationship.
Super toxic to the relationship. Thank you for summarizing it.
No.
So so in that situation, he just sort of started to back off a little bit and give Sadie the space that she wanted. And again, that's why
Now, were
they
they
described it
together at
as
this
on and
point,
off
or
again.
were they living together at any point,
Yeah, they lived together for quite a while. So they lived together for the first several years until I think 2011 is when he bought his house,
Mhm.
and then he moved into his house, and Sadie ended up moving into a different residence, and then they figured out, split placement and stuff like that. And primarily, the kids were all at Sadie's house because it was easier to do it that way. All of their toys, all of the diapers, all of the everything was
Right.
there, and he would just go over there and spend the night and spend the time with the kids. It also gave him some space so he could go and sleep in his quiet home and do things that he wanted to do. So it worked out. They had I don't know if it was symbiotic, but they had a decent relationship or an understanding in their relationship where they worked things out.
What and you
Um,
said that he was working to try and provide. What did he do?
actually worked for AT&T for a really long time. He was a lineman. He was like a service installer. He then went to be a lineman, and then he actually went to work in like the security hub on the West Coast that connects the fiber optic head between the United States and Japan. Like he worked there for a little while too. So he traveled around the United States as a lineman, laying wire and setting like high speed communication, doing things like that.
Mhm. Okay. So in 2018 or so, things start getting rocky. Were they was there a formal split at a certain point?
They say that they formally split in 2019 in December when at the fight they had. Actually, it was for the twins' birthday party that they were together and they had a massive blowout fight.
Mhm.
Sadie was screaming at him, swung a broom at him, called the cops on him. She tripped over her own Christmas decorations, and the cops showed up and they took him to the police station, but didn't charge him with it because he never laid a hand on her. And my dad was a witness there, watching her swing the broom at him.
Mhm.
So it was not a good situation. Again, this is her trying to build a narrative with the local law enforcement that my brother's a bad guy, knowing
Right.
that she was trying to build this case for her family court issue, which is something that she actually testified to, or that was evidentiary in the case, when she was text messaging back and forth with Rosario, when she specifically said, "I've been building a paper trail already." This was something that she was cognizant of, and
Yep.
that she was pushing for.
So um so they split up around 2019 or so,
Mhm.
and at at this time, so they were living apart the entire time. Did they? So when does Rosalio enter the picture here?
I believe that Sadie had met him on the Facebook dating app. The date was February 13th of 2020.
Hmm.
So all things considered, that's like a month and a half later, after Zach and Sadie had a fight, and it wasn't like the first time that they would have an argument and then he would give her some space and then they would make up. It happened repeatedly through their relationship. It was a normal thing.
Hmm.
So he had given her the space. They started talking again a little bit, and she tried to spin it that they were absolutely unequivocally broken up, but to his understanding, they were just on another break. And then he was, letting her know that he still loves her and wanted to be with her. And that was some of the messages that you saw or that were presented during the case as well. Was
Hmm.
this miscommunication? She didn't assert to him that they were absolutely done.
Hmm.
And he was under the impression that they were at some point going to get back together like they had done previously, even after that fight, because he really did care about her and he wanted to be there for his children and make it as close to amicable as possible for the kids.
Hmm. Now, I just want to be clear. I want to try and when I'm asking you questions here, it's not meant in any way to attack Zach or anyone. I'm really just trying to flesh out the story, and I also want to try and ask questions that some people who might be disinclined to believe Zach here, or
Sure.
or inclined to think that you're trying to cover for Zach one way or another. So I'm going to try to ask you questions that are designed to elicit your response to that. Maybe you'll have responses, maybe you won't. I don't know. We
Yeah,
haven't had any sort of pre-interview, but which I don't like to have a pre-interview. I like to actually ask, but I want to be clear that you shouldn't take it as me trying to attack you. I think that when someone is being questioned, it helps actually flesh out in a far more strong manner the position of where someone's coming from, because
absolutely.
you were just describing how Zach basically seemed to still be relatively hung up on Sadie, right?
Hmm.
Now, at a
Yep.
certain point in time, he ends up being picked up for stalking,
Hmm.
right? So, what can you tell us about that scenario?
Well, I mean, the scenario of the arrest, he had no idea what was happening. He was prepping for a family court case. He was looking up Gutierrez's information. He knew that this was probably going to descend into family court. There was a point where he just approached her and said, "Look, this is going to go to court." And they had a family court date set in June of 2020, I believe. And then Mr. Gutierrez disappeared on May the 17th. That's what the police and the prosecutor had alleged. Now on May the 19th, two men show up at his house.
Before we get there, I want to just stay on family court for a second. Was there any disposition at all from family court with respect to with palimony payments or custody? What was the disposition heading into his arrest at this point?
At that point, there was no alimony, there was no child support. Zach actually just paid for like the twins, their daycare, their schooling. He had effectively an allowance. He spent a bunch of money on the kids. He provided for them, soaking up a lot of the bills for the for Sadie and the twins. So he made sure to go out of his way to provide for the family out of pocket without it disseminating to a family court issue where she needed to collect on child support. So there was no standing order. There was an open custody agreement where he could spend the time with the kids. It was all effectively pro se. It was what they would do. They would communicate with each other. When he would pick up the kids, he would spend weekends with them. He would stop by during the week. He would watch them when Sadie had fistball and do things like that.
Hmm.
He actively was a member of the children's lives. Not only that, but because his basement flooded just about every spring, he didn't have a washer and dryer in his basement, so he would do his laundry at Sadie's house. So even during all of this time, during the time that she claims that he wasn't welcome in her home, and all this time even before that, he was going over to her house to do his laundry. It's not that he wasn't in the home. He was there regularly, both spending time with the kids and doing his laundry.
Now, this
It's
is like March of 2020, you say?
yeah, yeah.
So this is
February,
really the
March
start of
2020.
lockdowns with COVID, right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, but I assume that during lockdowns they were not locked down in the same place, right? I mean, they were. I mean, lockdowns didn't mean they were living in Wisconsin, obviously at the time, right?
Yeah,
W-
that's correct.
Are you, were you living in Wisconsin at this time?
I still am. Yes,
Okay, fine. So in the same vicinity as them?
I lived about 10 minutes north of Zach at the time.
Okay. So I don't know. So you would be familiar with what type of lockdowns Wisconsin had, because every state was like a little bit different with
Mhm.
respect to the way things were working. So I don't know if you recall, what lockdowns were like in the beginning, especially in 2020 when things first started locking down. But I assume that most people, it wasn't like any sort of restrictions on travel. It was more a matter of like people just stayed home and
Yeah.
didn't go to work. So I assume that's what he was dealing with at the time?
Yeah, he actually had a job with a local technical college at the time,
Mhm,
doing like IT support and things like that. So he would go in and he would troubleshoot any of their like their online classroom and stuff like that. So the all of the media equipment that was established in the North Campus there, he would go in and he would set those up and fix them and update them and troubleshoot them. So that was 2 minutes, 3 minutes down the road from his house. It was a very convenient job for him.
mhm.
Not only
Okay.
that, but he was doing some remodeling on the side. Construction didn't shut down during early stages of COVID. All construction stayed open as long as people were comfortable with you being in their home. Construction workers continued to work. So I had my business and it never stopped. If we got sick, we quarantined respectfully. We still did our full quarantine of the 14 days at the time. I ended up getting really sick in March, actually, in late March of 2020, and quarantined because of it. So there were some issues with COVID during that time, of course, right after it hit the states and we did the lockdowns. But by and large, he still went and did his construction, work on the side. That was the Susan Brown Williamson, the person that testified that the carpet was already out of the back of his van.
We're not up to
Uh,
that. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're
I
almost
know,
there.
I know, I
We're
know.
almost there.
I was just trying to tie it all together for everybody
That's
that's
cool.
out there as
That's
to
cool.
who he was working for, what he was doing. Other than that, he was free to spend the time with the kids and family and everything else.
We're definitely working our way there. So, um, during lockdowns, was his daughter was still living with Sadie?
Yeah, all three children were primarily, at Sadie's residence. That's where their toys were. That's where their belongings were. They hadn't gotten to the family court situation yet. There was still some time, but he was really concerned for their health and safety, and that's why he was pushing to go and take time and clean up his home. Honestly, he started cleaning out bedrooms that had otherwise sat as storage rooms in his home
Mhm.
and started to prep it for the kids. It was really important to him to make this work.
Yeah. I want to give you some encouragement off the bat that you're getting a lot of love here. Okay. And so is Zach.
Thanks.
It was really more Zach getting a lot of love through you. Because like I'm getting one super chat after another of free Zachariah Anderson, free Zachariah Anderson, people thanking me for having you on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that certainly my audience, Zach was worried about his children equals stalking, hashtag free Zachariah Anderson. Certainly my audience here, many of them recognize the injustice that he was facing. But let's I want to move forward into the heart of the story as presented by the DA and the conduct for which he was ultimately convicted. So let's start with what you know about Sadie's relationship with Rosalia.
As far as I understand, she had only met him in person like one, two, three, four times, five, something like that, four times, give or take.
Hmm.
So consider that she met him on the day before Valentine's Day, February the 13th.
13th.
She
Yeah.
said she met him at a coffee shop somewhere in February. That was her words, that she had met him once during February. Then she met him early March for the first time. After that, she went to Mexico. She came back and she had met him like about once every other week, once a month, give or take after that. So we're talking about a relationship where she might have talked to him and texted with him fairly regularly. She claims that they talked all the time, that it was a regular thing for him to say good morning to her and good night, and that they talked for large parts of the day. And I don't want to disparage whatever their connection was. If
Right,
she felt she had a connection to him, that was good for them.
right.
But uh,
I mean, that's a very limited level of relationship,
right,
considering how things unfold in May with the discovery of him gone missing. Right. I mean,
right,
to me, it sounds almost bizarre. I'm just giving my personal opinion on this. That from what I understand, so now it was in the middle of May. It was like May 15th is like the last time that she saw him. From what I understand,
May
right?
16th is the last time that
She
she
sees
saw
him
him.
on the 16th.
Yes.
Right, because I thought
So
I
that
thought you saw him on the 15th, and then didn't hear from him on the 16th or 17th, and went to his house on the 17th. Am I
no,
mistaken? Am I
you're
mistaken in this?
you're mistaken. So
Okay,
so
let's clear that up.
she went down to his house. She met his children on May the 16th for the first time. He had never even met her children, right? So just so we're clear about the status of the comfort level of their relationship. It's not like it was all in their kids are all mingling and all of this. She
Hmm.
had just met his children the night before he disappeared. May the 17th, he lies to her about spending time with his friend Mike and then has another girl over to his apartment. He goes missing that night.
How
On
do
May
you
the
know? You just said he lied to her. How do you know that he
Because
lied
in the
to her?
text messages, he told her very specifically that he was headed to Mike's house. He had a conversation, I believe, with one of his children's mothers at about 9 p.m. on May the 17th. And then Narita Macias, who is another girl from the Facebook dating app, shows up at his home about 40 minutes later, give or take. A half hour later, it was about 9:37, I believe, on the night of the 17th. And he doesn't invite her in according to the text message string between the two of them. So she never comes into the apartment. To her testimony, she said that she was outside of the building, never saw him come or go, never saw anyone else come or go out of his apartment, and then she left at a little after quarter after 10, if I remember correctly, maybe give or take. So
Mhm.
she's there for about a half hour. She texts him a couple of times. She texts him once and says, "I'm worried about you," and texts him at I think around 10:10, something like that, and says, "Okay, I'm leaving." Um, and uh, and then she takes off. But she was invited over by him, and he had a line of questions about what she would like to drink when she got there, and he was planning on having her over. But his conversation with Sadie was that he was going over to Mike's house that night, and that he was going to be hanging out with his buddy and not spending time with Sadie, or not being available on the phone for the rest of that evening. So he lies to Sadie,
Mhm.
invites a girl over, and then he no call no shows with her, and she allegedly leaves.
See, I'm looking at this guy, and you're describing a guy who has a life of like some playboy who's charming women left and right. And I gotta tell you, it's not what I would have guessed. Just taking a look. I'm just
I,
saying.
I
I'm not passing judgment. I'm just saying. Look, maybe in person he was really, he is, because we don't know if he's dead really, but
right.
is or was, exceedingly charming. Because I look at this and I'm like, I would not think that this is a guy who's juggling two two new
Three.
three right. I wouldn't have pegged him. But apparently he had some game, some level of
I
game. Right? I mean,
he at least has a good sense of humor or something. I mean, he's bringing something to the table for these girls to be invested in him.
he's
You know,
also
there
a
was
he's also a gazunta guy. He's a big guy, right? I mean,
Yeah,
this
he's
guy.
about 6 foot, 270. His mother actually, right after he disappeared, had cited in a news article that he was 280 pounds, and she couldn't see how it could be less than two people. It could be no less than two people because he was such a large man to commit this crime.
Even and just as far as so let's get into this crime that your brother has been now convicted of, and it starts with that he goes missing on May 17th, right? And she now Sadie comes to his house She doesn't have a key to his house, right?
No.
Right. So how does she get access to the house in order to discover that he's, that there's something foul that may have been happening here?
Well, some people might just call the local police station, the non-emergency number, to have them do a wellness check if someone's not answering the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Sadie didn't. She took it into her own hands. She went down and, to her words, did a wellness check on Rosalio. So she showed up at his house on the 19th at about 10, maybe 10:30 a.m., something like that. And I believe that the 911 call was registered at about 11 a.m. I might be misremembering that, but I think Jen has that phone record because we have it. Um, the 911 call specifically, but she claimed that she walked up to the patio door, saw that the patio door was open. Now he lived on the first floor, so the patio door is effectively right next to the front entrance of the apartment building. You have the apartment building front door, you have his apartment slider door to right next to it. I guess it would be juxtaposed. So you have open access right in front of you when you walk up to the building. The entry is not secured. It's not a locked, secured entry. You don't have to buzz in. So she walks in, and what she claimed was that she walked up to the patio door. She hollered in, didn't get a response. She walked over, knocked on the main door, thought something was wrong, and then went and opened the patio door to peek in and moved the blinds aside and saw what was the crime scene, which was some blood pooling on the floor, some blood splatter around the room with no answer in the apartment. She then got spooked, stepped out, called 911, called for assistance.
That's shady. I'm sorry. This sounds so weird to me. This sounds so weird to me. I mean, it's just okay. So now at this juncture, your 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 brother knows nothing about anything that's happening here, right?
No, no, my
Right.
brother has no idea. So
Okay.
my brother knew about the guy, right? He knew who he was, had looked him up, capped him, looked at some criminal history, looked at some of the criminal histories of some of his
What do
close
you mean? What do
friends.
you mean by sea captain? What is it? What is that?
CCAP is like the Wisconsin website where you can look up somebody's
Oh,
like criminal
okay.
history, the thing that their charges and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he had effectively Googled, looked this guy up, looked up his criminal history, looked at this guy's friends, their criminal history, like kind of the people that he hung out with regularly based on social media posts and the kind of stuff that they did together. Some of Mr. Gutierrez's friends were involved uh, in drugs and a bunch of other things, and my brother was very concerned about the man that Sadie was bringing into his children's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all he had ever expressed to me, that this guy was involved with some sort of drugs or something like that, and he was worried that she was bringing that into the kids'
That right,
lives.
right. Okay. And I am going to be mindful of the fact that your brother obviously has pending appeals, and I
Yeah,
certainly don't want to do anything, God forbid, to jeopardize any of these appeals. And and assuming he's successful in any of these appeals, I don't want, and he would have a retrial, presumably, almost certainly, and that retrial, I don't want anything that we discuss to end up in any way harming his ability to defend himself from that retrial. So while I'm trying to get information from you, I don't want to encourage you to say anything that might, God forbid, in any way negatively affect Zachariah down the road. Okay, so
right.
and I want to make that clear to my audience as well, that there might be certain questions which I sort of like, would want to ask about things that Zachariah might have said to you about Rosalio or things of that nature, which ultimately could end up, it could be enlightening and entertaining for us to discuss, and my audience may be curious about, but I certainly don't want to put him in a position where, God forbid, something gets, I don't want to end up becoming exhibit 436 in a retrial of Zachariah. That'd be like, oh my God, I would feel like I'm like just incredibly awful about that. So
I mean, to be
that's why
fair, I think that this would classify as hearsay. This is me talking about him saying something which should be translated as hearsay in some
I
way, shape, or
understand.
form,
I
right?
understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that. But if it comes back before Judge Schrader, okay, he
Let's
doesn't.
hope it doesn't.
I'm saying is, which I think in Wisconsin, I think it's very possible that on a retrial it might come back to him, to the original trial judge, that he seems to be pretty open with admissibility of things. So yeah, while I might be inclined to agree with you, it could be. Yeah, I just don't want. I don't want to risk. I don't want to walk down that. Oh my God, that would be just disastrous. I'm going to be imagine. You think I want to be sitting here streaming a retrial of Zachariah Anderson when Gravely is looking to introduce Exhibit 432, which is like a conversation between his Solomon and Joe Neerman, and I'm going to sit in there like saying to myself, "Oh, please keep it up, God, please keep it up, God, please keep it up." Like I don't need that. I don't need that.
Think of your exposure, Joe.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I would want to I would want to nuke my own channel after that. And I'm sure there's probably like thousands of other people who'd be like, go to hell, Joe. No, I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need that. So I'm gonna be walking very carefully here. And I'm not going to discuss any conversations you had with Zachariah about Rosalio and things of that nature. We're gonna try and dance carefully here while still eliciting information that
Dance
people
around it. Yeah,
yeah
no problem.
yeah okay. So at a certain point in time your brother ends up getting arrested. So what can you tell us about that?
So on May the 19th, he was cleaning out his van, actually. So he's cleaning out his van and he's throwing stuff in the dumpster, and two men pull onto his property. They get out of their car and they start walking up to his house to try and peer in his windows to see if they can see anything. And he's standing at the dumpster, which is straight down the driveway. So you drive straight in, the dumpster straight ahead, and he sees them walking up to his house, up on a slight rise. And he hollers to him. He goes, "Excuse me, can I help you?" And they walk up to him, and one apparently was fidgeting with his waistband, and the other one walks up to him and he says, "I'm looking for Zachariah Anderson." And my brother looks at both of them and he says, "Oh, I'm his brother. Uh, I can tell him that you're here. What do you need him for?" I
Mhm.
mean, what else are you going to do with two grown men that are approaching you that
i'm
look
not
like
i'm not
they're
questioning what he said to them.
yeah,
And so
so these two men approach him. He lies to him. He tells him that he's his own brother,
mhm.
just to get him off of his property. He goes into the house. He asks Christine, his girlfriend, if there was anything that had gone on that she knows about, why two men would be there looking for him. She says no. He then calls me. I miss his call. He calls my eldest brother to talk to him, who's on the tree farm with my dad. Is spooked by these two guys that showed up, that meant, in their body language at least, and his read on it, meant to do him harm. And my eldest brother goes, "Call the cops. I'm on my way." So Josh then leaves the tree farm, which is about 45 minutes away, and he drives down to Zach's house. Zach at that time calls 911 for assistance because two men trespassed on his property. They looked like they were hostile, and they were asking. They had asked a couple of questions, or mentioned a missing friend or something like that. He didn't know what the hell was happening, and he asked for help. The cops show up and they arrest him.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
That's
So they
pretty that's pretty wild.
so they show up after he calls 911 for help. They arrest him. They take him to the police station. My eldest brother shows up. They tell him that he was taken to the Mequon police station. He goes to the Mequon police station. They put him in a questioning room,
Your brother,
my other brother Josh,
Josh.
into an interrogation room.
Right.
And my eldest brother flippantly, as a joke, because he thought that maybe Zach had gotten into an altercation with these two men, and that somehow something had happened. They had taken him to the police station. they ask him why he's there, and my eldest brother said flippantly something along the lines of, "Well, I would be the first person he would call if he had to hide a body," and uh, and and
God.
then and then was immediately questioned further, right? Like it was supposed to be just dark humor.
Right.
They didn't know anything about what was happening, and it
Right.
was like the worst humanly possible timing. He had no idea that anybody was missing.
Yeah.
Zach didn't know that anybody was missing. In fact, Zach didn't even know when he was getting arrested. They questioned him about what he was doing 2 nights ago. He didn't sleep well that night. He had taken a nap and then been up for a good portion of the night, had gone to bed, gotten up, worked all day, then was with his girlfriend. He said, "I don't know, probably with my girlfriend." And then they laid into him harder about the situation, and when they started to be more aggressive, he said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, I think I need my lawyer," and then he invoked his right, and they couldn't question him anymore. So what they did is they arrested him. They took him to Kenosha. He didn't know that he was an interest or a suspect in this missing persons case for days. So they arrested him, and days later
What charge did they arrest him on?
they arrested him on stalking.
Hmm.
But they didn't tell him that until afterwards, and they hauled him to Kenosha, and then they had him sign paperwork, I believe, when he was already in Kenosha, that outlined this missing person, and he said, "Wait a minute, excuse me, you're charging me with what, or you're investigating me for what? I'm sorry, we have a misunderstanding." But by then, they already had him in Kenosha, and they're honed in on only him.
So when he gets arrested for stalking, and this was, you said, May 19th, right?
May the 19th, yes.
Okay. And he gets counsel on the 20th. He's saying like the next day, or it was later that day?
Josh was the one that hired counsel, but
Hmm.
I think he was at first appointed um, um, a public defender, but that person was dismissed because we had hired his counsel very quickly thereafter.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to point out, if you're ever arrested or detained, invoke your Fifth Amendment rights clearly and expressly without any hesitation. Be explicit that you're invoking your Fifth Amendment rights. It's a really, really critical step for any of you who ever find yourself like caught in any sort of scenario where like all of a sudden you're being questioned by the police. The first question you have is, am I being detained? And if they say yes, you invoke your Fifth Amendment rights. You never want to be answering questions. The cops are not your friend. They're not there to help you. They are there to try and put you behind bars for as long as possible. If you look at them with that perspective, no matter how smiling in the face, no matter how nice it is, no matter how many candy bars or literally candy bars or cans of Coke they offer you, it's just not worth accidentally saying something that, God forbid, could be something that you're going to regret for the rest of your life. So now he gets arrested, and so how long after that is he arraigned?
Actually, I would have to look at the docket for that, for how many days it took for him to be arraigned,
Huh.
but I believe it was a couple of days.
Oh.
Um, but they arrested him, and they held him, and they set his bail initially at $35,000 for the stalking charge, which seemed excessive. To my understanding, it was still around 7 times more than it should have been for a stalking charge.
Mhm.
So we had no idea what was going on. We had absolutely no idea, and we only found out through some other discussions, and through um, I believe my sister finding out some information as to what he was accused of. Um, for the fact that he was interested in this missing persons case. That's when we understood that it was going to be most likely a homicide defense.
So when okay, so you're saying that did he end up coming up with the $35,000 that he had to post his bond?
We talked about it, and we specifically decided to not spend the money on it because they were withholding charges. We knew that they were going to slap some other charges on him as soon as he made bail the first time and throw him back in jail. They had actually presented some evidence during the trial about finding, some marijuana in his home and stuff like that. So we had a very large concern that, say we make, bail at 35,000, you have to pony up, what is it, like 30 or 50% of that or whatever it is in order
Hmm.
to make bail. Then that's still, over $10,000 that we don't have at our disposal to be able to invest in his defense. So we decided that we were going to, spend the money on lawyers, that we were going to retain some good attorneys and move forward with it.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to the evidence, and a lot of people are bringing up questions like this super chat that came up a lot earlier, where Joe is saying no witness saw the blood on Rosalio's door on May 18th, despite being in plain view and inches from all tenants' mailboxes. We'll come to that soon. I'm getting almost there. I just sort of wanted to cover that, but I think this is a good time to sort of address this question with respect to the probable cause for stalking. So in order to even arrest him for that, they need to establish probable cause. How did they get to that?
They claimed that it was jealousy. So that's been their whole claim. That's been the backbone of their case, is that he was this obsessive, jealous man, and that he was obsessively jealous of Sadie's new relationship. But he didn't really exhibit that. All the recorded phone calls that they had found on his computer, they had one conversation with her where he said, "Of course, I'm jealous. I still love you."
Right.
But then he immediately moves on to say, "But you're supposed to be doing your thing, and I'm supposed to be doing mine." He had already established a relationship with Christine. He was very happy with Christine, actually.
Hmm.
At the time, they were very good for each other and very supportive. And Christine even
Wait,
told him,
Christine is. Could just clarify for me. Christine is who here?
Christine Remsburg, she was his girlfriend. She dated him for about a year up to that point. So, like I said, they were kind of on off again. He and Sadie at that point, he and Christine had started talking, roughly a year before this time frame, and then they had a relationship, during this same arc of time that Sadie started dating and all of these other things, right?
But
So
yeah, but with
so
respect to that probable cause on the stalking, there had to be a complaint that was filed by Sadie with respect to the
yep.
stalking.
Sadie accused him of stalking on the crime scene when she called 911 and the police showed up. She told the police, "I know who do this," or she said that Zach must have had something to do with this.
And that's the
Uh,
first time she mentioned stalking to the police is when she discovers the blood in Rosalio's apartment.
yes, she claimed that she had tried to go to the Menominee Falls PD to bring stalking against him. I haven't seen any documentation of that ever occurring, and I would be shocked if she had done that and there was an attempt at a police report
Hmm.
that Gravely would not have used in establishing a history of stalking. It was never presented, and I don't know that it ever existed. She claimed that she did, but
Hmm.
to my knowledge, there was never any record of anything other than her. She made Zach tell her that he was stalking her to give him his cell phone back when she discovered his cell phone underneath one of the twins' car seats. In a situation where she knew that it was in her car, and she drove to Kenosha with it anyway.
How does she know it's in her car?
So she
So
found
now,
it,
just to
or
be
her
clear,
or
just
her
just to be
brother found
clear,
it.
because I'll just I'll catch you up to what I know with respect to the evidence on the stalking claim, and I'm going to ask you to flesh out so anyone who's watching this and learning this story for the first time can understand context here. The evidence that I've heard of to support the stalking claim is I'm aware of three things. One of them being that there was what Sadie called a burner phone that she found under the baby seat, which apparently I don't know how much evidence was presented to show that was connected to him specifically. I don't know if you can flesh that out for us,
It
but one
was
of those,
absolutely his phone.
it was his phone.
It was his phone, but there's a break in logical connection here. He
So wait, but I just
specifically,
to flesh out. So there's three. From what
yeah.
I understand, there's three
Okay, go ahead.
things. Okay,
The other two.
there's there's a cell phone, and maybe two of them are related. There's this cell phone that's left in her car, which belongs to him,
Hmm.
which is supposed to make the jury think that he's trying to track her movements. He does have, he's he's working in phone lines, so he would understand perhaps how to do that more effectively than just some and than most people would. He would have more familiarity with that. I understand that there was something with respect that his daughter testified that she saw some sort of tracking thing happening on one of his computers in his house. That she testified something about a GPS thing, from what I recall.
I think that was in Sadie's house, actually, because his desktop computer was upstairs in Sadie's house.
Okay. Okay. Which I'm not sure how he would have access to that computer to be stalking Sadie. That doesn't even make sense to me. I don't
I have
understand
no
that at
idea.
all.
I
I
don't
don't
know
understand. I
how
don't
that
understand
occurred.
that at all. And his daughter also testified that about one time that she was with him. Well, she testified about two events. One time that she was with him, that he went to Rosalio's house. I believe it was Rosalio. It was Sadie's house or Rosalio's house. Then he was like sort of peeking inside the house.
That was her house, so that was her apartment,
So
which
that
was a
he
very messy testimony. We can get to that, but
Oh yeah,
um,
I want to talk about her testimony a little bit because her testimony was just bizarre, and there was a lot of things that troubled me about the testimony she was allowed to give, and the impact that and how damaging that testimony came across, and how wrong that testimony felt to me. But what I'm asking you is, was there any other evidence to this stalking? I mean, so was there any other evidence besides the daughter's testimony and this phone, as far as you know?
um, it was Sadie's testimony, the daughter's testimony, this phone.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay.
So that was all they had to bring the stalking charge against him. Now the phone specifically, it doesn't make sense because he was texting Sadie about the phone being missing. You don't plant a phone in someone's car and then text the person, "Have you seen my cell phone? I've been looking all over for it."
Hmm.
Right? The
Right.
smartphone went missing. He's looking for it. He messages her, trying to locate it. She knows that it was in her car, and she plays a game with him,
Why
trying
would she
trying
know
to
why would she know
withhold
it's
it.
in the car? He texted her asking, saying that he thought he lost it in the car?
He said that he can't find it, and that he tore the house apart trying to find it, and he was wondering if he had accidentally dropped it in her vehicle.
Mhm. Oh, so
Um,
he asked her specifically about it being in the vehicle in the text messages?
Yeah, that he had left it with her on
Okay.
accident.
Okay.
And I'm someone might be able to pull up the exact text messages in the exchange, but he specifically asked her about this cell phone. So the cell phone that they claim that he was using to track her, he goes out of his way to ask her about the cell phone. Then she finds it actually underneath the car seat when she stops at her brother's house on her way to Rosalia's house, locates the phone, doesn't turn it off, leaves it on, drives to Rosalia's house, then turns it off at some point down there, or I believe. So she drives all the way down to Rosalia's house and has it there. She then withholds it. I think this is May 7th or 8th or something like that. She withholds it and tells Zach that she won't give the phone back to him unless he admits to stalking her. So she tells him that she absolutely won't give it back to him, and he looks at her and he goes, "Are you kidding me? You're not going to give me my property back?" And she said, "Nope, not until you admit to doing it." And then he said, "Fine, I was stalking you. Give me my phone." Right?
Mhm.
So like anybody would do, like, "Fine, I'll tell you what you want to hear," and
Right.
then carried on.
Okay.
So in her mind at that time, she's made up this story and believes that he's absolutely unequivocally following her.
Mhm.
So, that was based on my niece telling her about the trip over to the house the night of the ding dong ditch. That exchange, which
The
was
ding
a
dong
really,
ditch, can you explain
yeah,
what that
that
means?
so that was the window peeking night.
Alright.
So, like you had mentioned, the first act of stalking was the night that they had driven over there. That was the eve or the early morning hours of my niece's birthday, where um, where they park the car in the bar parking lot next door, and he goes out, and my niece claims that he puts the phone next to the air conditioner, which isn't physically possible because the living room is on the other side of the house from the bar's parking lot, so you couldn't see it even with 2020 or night vision. And you make it he then comes and gets her, brings her over, lets her peek in the window, and to their testimony, tells her to cover her nose and mouth with her shirt so she doesn't fog up the glass, and peeks in, and then they leave. And on their way out the bar driveway, they stop in front of Sadie's driveway, and then he allegedly gets out. He goes up to the vehicle, according to my niece's testimony, opens up the door, goes through the glove box, and then takes the title, or the license, or the registration of the vehicle.
Let's slow
and a
down.
letter.
Slow down. There's a lot to digest. So I just want to just make sure I got all this straight. So the window you're saying that they're looking through was that. Are you saying that even with 20/20 vision, you couldn't see through because it was on the other side of the apartment? Can you explain?
So there was a reference.
What's happening there?
That was a reference to I mean, if maybe I could draw a little diagram for you, right?
Okay.
So you have effectively one side of the building. You have let's see. We have here building going back. So in my crayon sketch, which is still better than the police sketch of the apartment, we have here, this is like the driveway. Say the car is parked. I don't know exactly where because I wasn't there, but the car is parked about right here with the headlights facing away from the building.
Okay.
You then have the building right here. This right here is Sadie's apartment. This, because it was a duplex, is the apartment next door.
Okay.
This right here is a little bump out where the living room windows are. This down here is where the patio door is, that you can see through into the kitchen, which is about right here. This is a 2-story dwelling. The bathroom is about right here. And she claims that she could see him put the phone in an air conditioning unit side vent. But the window that he would have to have gone to is on the other side of the building. You couldn't actually see the window that he would have gone to peek in at all from the vehicle if you were sitting in the vehicle and waiting for him to return. It wasn't physically possible.
Saying the building was blocking her, obstructing her view of everything.
Completely obstructing. Now this little horseshoe shape over here, it was actually there was a driveway on that side with a garage, and that is where Rosalio was parked. He was over on the other side of the building. So to the testimony, they pull out of the driveway to the bar, which is adjacent to the house. They turn down the road. They stop. They pull over into the driveway, or at the mouth of the driveway, and then she alleges that he goes in through Gutierrez's glove box, which I found odd because when they brought the police witness on the stand that went through his Google searches, he actually had searched for a free application or a free website to look up a license plate for Colorado, which is where that truck was registered. So why would he have had to have looked up the license plate to the owner of a Colorado truck if he had taken the registration? There's a massive logical disconnect. It doesn't make sense.
Hey, MLS, how are you, brother? You met MLS, right?
Yeah. I did.
He was one of the people who was promoting that I should definitely get you on, and it was a great call. So thank you, David, for that. Let's move forward here with respect to the evidence with respect to. Let's talk about not Sadie, his daughter's testimony, because that is something that I saw, and I have like a whole bunch of questions about the testimony, and we're talking about what she said on the stand. So what did you and or Zachariah's, really more Zachariah's attorneys, find objectionable about his daughter's testimony, if anything?
Well, there's a lot.
Okay, let's break it down. Let's break it down.
Like I just said, I mean, even to the point of her testimony about being able to see what he did that night, to those details. That was a massive issue. You couldn't physically see him approach that window from the car. It wasn't possible. The video that they presented to the court was dark, was all black footsteps, with some light streaks on it. There was no definitive anything in that video. So if you looked at the video that they alleged occurred on the night of the early morning hours of the 25th of April, all they saw was this like bluish light in what appeared to be a window after a certain number of minutes of walking through the darkness, and then Sadie just says, "That was my window." So you have then my niece's testimony where she says that she saw him walk up to this window, which is physically not possible. You know, I think that Attorney Mueller had made a comment about having night vision, being able to see in the dark, and she said, "I have 20/20 vision. Thank you very much," which you know, made the jury laugh. You know, because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. Right.
And
Apparently,
and
she's better than 2020. She's got Superman vision. She can like see
yeah,
through. She can see
yeah.
through anything. So
Right
yeah.
through it, yeah. So I mean, realistically, so there's some issues with this testimony, and like I said, there's, you know, she alleged that he had gone through Gutierrez's vehicle, and there was all this stuff, but then you know, with a different witness had searched the license plate, right? He'd
hmm
used his phone to look up the license plate. Why would he have to do that if he went through the man's glove box and discovered who he was based on the registration? So those things don't make sense. You know, if you start going through some of the other things, there's a tremendous amount of concern for the amount of witness tampering that the DA had perpetuated or perpetrated with my niece. It was,
Well, witness tampering is a significant charge, which I don't know that your brother certainly would label
I
it
mean,
witness tampering. Maybe he will in his appeal. Maybe he won't. I don't know.
I don't know if that would stick as far as the legalese goes, but
Right.
the reality is that to our understanding, Michael Gravely and his office spent 40 hours going over my niece's testimony with her. That's a whole week, a whole week of time going over this testimony. There's a
Wow.
reason why she could name the number of plants in my brother's home, but could not remember that my sister Zenith was driving around with her at the tree farm on the 15th of May, literally days before all of this went down. So on the weekend that Rosalio disappeared, she couldn't remember that my sister had been hanging out with her and drove around with her on the farm, but she could absolutely remember the boots. She could absolutely remember the chainsaw exchange. She could absolutely remember the number of plants that my brother had in his home and
hmm
cite all of this information about a hydroponic system, but then couldn't actually identify marijuana when a picture of it was shown to her.
So
So there's
let's talk about this. You mentioned a chainsaw. Can you just explain to people who didn't see any of the trial what you mean by the chainsaw evidence?
So they presented evidence of the chainsaw existing. The reality is that one of the canine units.
Your brother owning a chainsaw. You mean?
My brother had a chainsaw. He had a
Okay.
very large steel chainsaw that he used to cut down a bunch of the trees that were dying and dropping a lot of dead wood all over his yard. And he didn't want one to fall on his barn, so he started cutting down his trees. Now he had.
Is this chainsaw in anyone's possession or is it missing right now?
I haven't seen it actually. I don't think that
Because you
Josh
would
has it
think that
all on.
you would think that if he has a chainsaw, that if it was used for the purpose of killing Rosalio, in that case there'd probably be DNA all over it, unless the chainsaw is missing. That's why I'm wondering.
Well, the chainsaw they found when they searched the property. They found a chainsaw, and I believe it's in the evidence. So they
But
took it.
there's no DNA from Rosalio on the chainsaw.
None. No. So the
So then I don't
canine
even
unit.
understand why the chainsaw is even relevant to this
It's
case.
not. It's not. It's
So
not at all.
why is there testimony going on about this chainsaw?
Only because they wanted to confuse and muddy the water. They did that a lot during this case, where they presented irrelevant information. They presented information that was just something to talk about. They had a canine unit actually mark on the chainsaws. So then they confiscated the chainsaw. This chainsaw exchange was relevant. They wanted to prove that it was significant in some way to my brother borrowing or getting my dad's work boots. My dad's old work boots were then nowhere to be found, and they found a pair of steel toe points in the fire, trying to set the stage that he had taken my dad's boots, used it to commit this crime, and then burned them in the fire. I don't even know anything about these boots. My dad could probably talk about them, but if my brother didn't think he wanted to use the boots, if they didn't fit his feet correctly or whatever it was, he probably just got rid of them. That would be something my brother would do.
Well, let's pause for a second, because this is a good time for us to break down basically all of the key evidence that they brought in to try and establish that your brother murdered Rosalio. Okay, so this is what's publicly available, what I read, because this is not part of the trial that I actually managed to watch. But basically, from what I understand, the cops claim that they found some of Rosalio's clothing. Now, just for those of you who are unaware of the facts here, no body has ever been found. The cause of death, what they found was a pool of blood that is in Rosalio's house, which basically matches his DNA. That pool of blood according to the police, is too much for him to have lost without being murdered. Although when you look at the pictures, it looks like a lot of blood. I'm not going to kid you. It looks like the amount of blood someone would, let's say, lose. It's not someone scraping and falling down and cutting their knee. It looks like someone at least lost a finger, if not more than that, and that level of blood. Okay, that's in my personal opinion. I'm not testifying. I'm just saying, from the pictures I saw, it looks as if someone could have, like, let's say, lost a hand and lost that amount of blood. That doesn't mean that someone's dead, in my opinion, but I don't know the quantity of blood.
I work in an emergency room.
Okay.
I've personally witnessed someone come in with an arterial bleed on a foot laceration, bleed more than what I saw in that apartment.
That's a fair point.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't have a dangerous injury that could have led to the end of his life, but the reality is that I have absolutely seen someone, trying to staunch a wound in the emergency room. I've tried to staunch a wound. I've watched someone lose 2 liters of blood.
Right.
So and that was not enough to kill them.
Now, okay, so let's move forward. So now, with respect to the evidence they have to link your brother to the crime of murder here, from what I understand, there was a smoldering fire pit that they claim was on your brother's premises that contained some of Rosalio's clothing. Is there anything?
That is absolutely false.
Wait, did I get that wrong, or
no?
Is that report?
You are talking about what was released to the press, which is an absolute lie. The DA had a PR person tell lies to the mainstream media, and that was one of the lies that they told. They never found any of Rosalio's clothing on any property related to my brother. Not a single shred of it. It didn't exist. They lied.
Wow.
Absolutely lied.
That is a massive lie, because otherwise, if you remove the stalking from this whole thing, was the stalking charge, and from what I understand, there's really only evidence. I mean, there's very limited evidence on the stalking charge. So basically, you're saying the key thing to me that links him to Rosalio is that clothing, which was in that smoldering pit. And you're saying there was no evidence at trial presented about that?
No, they never presented any evidence. What they presented was Zach's clothing in his own burn pit. That's what they presented. So that was the evidence as provided in the courtroom. Now, Zach was cleaning out bedrooms. He had a like I said, an old farmhouse with a roof leak in one of the closets. And in that closet, he had clothes stored, old clothes that he didn't really wear anymore.
Okay.
Plus, my grandmother had just died, and we cleaned out her home. We had been burning a bunch of things that were left over from her death, and cleaning out her home, and things that had no value for us moving forward, sentimentally or otherwise. So we were going through all this stuff, and we were burning a bunch of things that didn't have a place, that didn't belong anywhere, that were too far worn to give to Goodwill, that needed to just go. And in this situation, when they said that they found my brother's clothes, remnants of my brother's clothes in the fire pit, I said, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
They said a smoldering fire pit. They also claimed that it rained very hard during this time period, and I believe that some of the people in our group, I had asked people to specifically look up the weather report, and we had gotten like not even an inch of rain over the days that they're describing. So
Why is
so
the rain relevant specifically?
because they claim that the fire was still hot and then he was burning all of these belongings even though it was raining buckets, but it
Oh, I see. Okay.
misted a little bit and it was crummy and overcast. It wasn't beautiful weather, but it wasn't raining hard. He
Right.
had a fire on the 15th.
So they're trying to imply the only reason someone would be running a fire outdoors in terrible rain is because they're trying to get rid of evidence when in
Yep.
fact it wasn't that type of weather condition which would inhibit most people from using a fire pit.
Yeah, not only that, but it wasn't even enough rain to put out the coals in the bottom of the fire pit. It
Hmm.
just wasn't. When he would have a
Wow.
fire, it would be lots of large logs and all kinds of stuff, and
Wow.
then the coals deep inside of that fire pit would stay warm for days. This is
Hmm.
not something that's strange. For people that grew up in the country, they understand how this works. If you don't get a torrential downpour, those coals are still going to be warm. And
Hmm.
he had a good fire on Friday the 15th of May because we were supposed to play D&D that night, and he said, "I'll see you later." I spoke with him that day, and then he didn't show up at D&D, and he had texted me, "Oh, sorry, I decided to have a fire, and that's what I'm doing instead." So very specifically had a fire that night. And then Andrew Schultz was brought on the stand, and he talked about how he was there for that fire on that Friday night, and that my brother drove him home on the 16th. That was part of the testimony.
Wow.
So he had a big fire. He had people over. They had some drinks. They hung out, and then he drove Andrew home on Saturday. Saturday like 10, 11, or whatever it was,
Hmm.
and then went back home.
Wow. It's the whole thing was very strange because if he was like getting rid of if he had committed this murder, right? I mean, whoever committed this murder. I mean, think about this. Why would he take the clothing and burn the clothing? Like, what are you doing with the body? Why don't we just get rid of it together with the body? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't even make sense to me how he, why he would have done that. Now, the other evidence that I understand that linked Zachariah, allegedly linked Zachariah to this murder, was a spot of DNA that was found in his van that that the police were able to identify as definitely being male DNA, but not sure if it's Rosalio's or it could be, in theory, even be Zach's himself. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion
It
around
was
it.
such a small amount of DNA. Right? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just one correction. My eldest brother Josh, who's in the chat, he actually just texted me and said that he has Valhalla. He's got the big chainsaw, but my brother had a chainsaw at the property that the police claimed that they confiscated, that the dogs had marked on.
Hmm.
So I might be mistaken on which chainsaw it was, but they had actually testified that the dogs had marked on a chainsaw specifically. It just wasn't they call it the Sword of Valhalla. It's like a massive, like 3 foot long chainsaw blade. It's a very
But
large
I don't even
chainsaw.
get where this chainsaw stuff has anything to do with anything at the end of the
It
day.
doesn't.
I
It
mean, there's
doesn't.
no DNA on a chainsaw. There's no reason
None.
to think that a chainsaw had anything to do with this. Quite the contrary. The lack of DNA would lead me to believe that a chainsaw had nothing to do with this entire thing.
That's correct. Yeah, and why they focused on it at all was ridiculous. But
No, I can tell
um,
you why they focused on it. The reason you would focus on it is to try and make you think the jury think, aha, he's got a chainsaw.
yeah,
Speaking of which, and I'm going to come back to his daughter's testimony. Speaking of which, there was also talk about a gun, right?
which didn't exist.
So hold on a second. When you say didn't exist, from what I understand, your brother spent some time in California, and while he was living in California, he had a gun there. Is that accurate or inaccurate? What can you tell me about that?
That was a that there's no proof of that, not to my knowledge. My brother, so as it turns out, Zach was a felon at that time, and he absolutely unequivocally did not own a firearm. He refused to have a firearm. Moreover, he told me when I stayed at his house, I have a shotgun that's used for hunting. It's a slug gun,
Hmm.
and I had that in his home, and he actually was very upset with me about it because he could be charged with that firearm being in his home, and he said very specifically that that gun is not allowed on his property and that it needed to live somewhere else. So there was no gun in his property. There was no gun at all.
Mm-hmm.
Period. It's not a thing.
Okay, okay, fine. So you're saying he didn't own any gun at all. So
No.
so let's come back now to the testimony from his daughter. Okay, because this is the part that I saw, and there were so many things that I saw here which really bothered me. So those of you again who didn't have a chance to watch the trial, I'll share with you a couple of things. What you were describing to me would be less of an issue for appeal than the issues I'm about to bring up to you, which I'm sure that his attorneys are certainly intelligent enough to understand why these would be more significant issues for appeal. Because when you're appealing, you cannot contest a finding of an issue of fact from the jury. So, as opposed to an issue of law with respect that you can appeal and say, and basically if you want to just sort of understand the distinction here, it's like the judge and a call that's being made by the judge as to what rules of the game are going to apply. That's something that if there's a significant enough error that you can actually appeal that, and they'll say, okay, that was a violation, he wasn't allowed to apply rules like that to this trial. Since he did, the appeal is successful and we're going to vacate this conviction, as opposed to a jury illogically coming to a conclusion about finding a fact. So if a jury was too stupid in the way they handled things, and they basically said, you know what, we think that his daughter had the capacity to look through brick and steel and wood and see her father on the other side of the building, and saw him planting a phone there, or whatever type of stalking thing that she was describing, and that was their finding. I can't tell you it's impossible to overturn that, but it's pretty, for all intents and purposes, it's impossible to use that to overturn, because that would be a
Yeah.
finding of fact. The jury reaches a factual conclusion that that's what he was doing when he was on the other side of the building. And whether they thought she was looking through two windows or whatever it is, that finding of fact, you're never gonna have a chance on a successful appeal there. It's practically impossible.
Yep.
With respect to the rules that Schroeder laid out, if there was a significant enough breach of the rules that the appellate court can feel, hey, we think that he not only breached the rules, but that this breach could have wrongfully led to a conviction by the jury, that could be a what's called a reversible error, and that type of thing could invalidate the conviction and give him an opportunity to having a second trial. Now, that there are certain things that I saw during her testimony that I was apoplectic, sometimes apoplectic, sometimes screaming as to like how wrong it is. One of the issues was respect to the plants that she testified. So can you just walk, you made reference to the plants, that she knew the number of plants. Can you walk everyone through that part of her testimony as to what it is that she said and that time, and then I'll explain the legal issues around it to the audience here. So if you can just like catch them up to the best of your recollection as to what she said about the marijuana plants.
So Michael Gravely, through a series of leading questions,
That's the district attorney is
the
Michael
district
Gravely.
attorney, the prosecutor Michael Gravely had through a series of leading questions and multiple choice questions had led her to a line of questioning that was inquiring about a marijuana grow operation in my brother's home. And he was started to ask specifics about that marijuana grow operation. He was trying to use this to bolster his witness's credibility. And in that, he specifically cited to your knowledge, how many plants was your father growing? And she said 72 plants. So very highly specifically that she saw 72 plants grown. She saw him prune them. She knew about the pruning and harvesting process, and she was privy to this whole thing.
Right.
Then he showed her a picture of
Well,
a jar in a fridge.
Right. Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute. Which was to me hilarious. Okay, now here's the issue with introducing, or the judge allowing the witness, the DA, and to ask these questions, and allowing his daughter to testify about this. One of the things that we are very concerned about is introducing evidence in front of a jury that may get them to dislike or will get them turn them to be prejudiced against a defendant. This is particularly so with respect to criminal defense, but this even applies in civil courts. But you don't want to have a jury think, oh wow, we hate this guy, so we're just going to convict him because he's just such an evil jerk. Now,
Mm-hmm.
having his so the basis that when Gravely decided to start questioning her about the marijuana plants, the defense objected to this. And they basically said this is going to be prejudicial because all of a sudden now the jury's going to hear that he's got some marijuana operation going on there, and they're gonna hate him. And especially when you consider the fact that not just he has a marijuana operation, but he has a marijuana operation that he's, almost practically indoctrinating his teenage daughter into, that she's around it and knows about it, which doesn't sound like good parenting to anyone. So that being the case, that could turn a jury emotionally against him, even if they don't have factual basis to convict him of the charges that he's being accused of.
Yep.
So what was the argument that Gravely made in order to get over this hurdle? He said, well, I want the jury to know that she's familiar with the premises. So in order for her to describe the premises, she has to explain the plants. She has to talk about these marijuana plants so that they can know that she's really been there and that she really knows about it, which I'm not even sure why it is that her proving that she had been there is very relevant. Unless there was, that's why I thought the stalking was from the alleged stalking was from his own computer, because who cares if she's ever been there? Let's say she had never been there. I don't understand how that would have undercut her testimony on behalf of the state. But let's just put that aside for a second. You don't need it. If you want to try and establish that she's been there are thousands of ways that the prosecutor could have asked questions of the daughter to establish that she had such sufficient knowledge of the place that she must have been there, without ever introducing any evidence that he's conducting any sort of criminal activity in his own home, like growing marijuana plants. You could have asked about the color of the door. You could have asked her to describe the layout of the place. You could have, and then you walk in here, and the kitchen's on the left, and the refrigerator is silver. So he used to have a white refrigerator. Now it's a silver refrigerator. You could say the wallpaper is peeling on this wall, and you could give such thorough detail. And that you can basically ask these questions. What can describe what color the drapes were, and describe what his bathroom looked like, and how he always left his jeans, hanging over the bathtub. There's 1,000 different ways you can describe it without ever talking about marijuana plants. You don't have to talk about marijuana plants. The only reason you're saying it's, to establish some sort of thing that's what he wanted to do. I'm going to tell you, you're giving him too much credit and being too kind to him. That's not what Gravely was trying to do. He was specifically trying to prejudice the jury. That's why he's asking those questions. And the fact that Schrader allowed him to prejudice the jury by enabling the daughter to talk about it, to me, is a significant error, which might lead one to have concerns that a jury would convict him, and did in fact convict him, because they hated him for being a marijuana grower, even though that's not a reason, in my opinion, to hate anyone. But that they might have convicted him on that basis, having nothing to do with any stalking charges, any murder charges, or anything of the kind. So to me, that's the sort of thing that was an error so what you basically would be saying, the appellate court hopefully will find, is that it was an error by Schrader to allow her to be questioned and to testify with respect to those marijuana plants. And you're right, it was comical. It was comical that when she was asked about those marijuana plants later on, she was shown a jar of marijuana that was found in his refrigerator, and she and Gravely said, "Can you tell us what that is?" She's like, "What is that? I don't know what that is. What is that?"
Yeah, it was a bag of marijuana, and
that what it was?
There was a jar of mushrooms that was growing in the refrigerator. So there were mushrooms in the refrigerator, and then this marijuana, right? So in the situation, she couldn't identify what the jars were. She couldn't identify what the what the marijuana was. When presented a photo like shooting down the barrel of a bag of marijuana, right? So you're right, absolutely comical. And I'm not trying to give him credit. That was his argument. Like he
Right.
was saying that he was trying to
Right.
give credibility to this witness by getting her to describe this marijuana grow operation, which was still ridiculous that she could cite the number of plants, but then
Yes.
couldn't cite anything else.
Right.
How much time did he spend with her going over this testimony
Saying
to try and cement that
72
down?
plants. Yeah.
Yeah, very specifically, highly specifically, that
Yeah.
this was such a huge part of
As if she
of
sat
his
there going
questioning.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
Yeah,
12. Wait, I lost count. 57, 56. Let me start over. 1, 2, 3. Like that's what
right,
really happened. I mean, come on. Now, I guess perhaps it's possible they were lined up in rows of like 6 by 12. I don't know. But
even still,
yeah, even still, yeah. And the fact that she couldn't that she knew it was marijuana, but couldn't identify marijuana sitting in a jar is it makes you question how much information was. It would make anyone question how much did the prosecutor themselves in their office basically feed her information that they wanted
right.
her to say on the stand,
I mean,
and
Rucker,
it's very
there's
disconcerting.
verbiage that she used, like what 11-year-old, right? What 11, 12-year-old understands what a Dear John letter is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So
I
you want to talk
how
about
does
the
she
dear?
understand this language?
Let's talk about the Dear John letter.
I
So
that she claimed that there was a Dear John letter that my brother had taken out of the glove box or something like that. That he had a Dear John letter that was discussed between Sadie and Gutierrez, that specifically was a letter to the previous owner or something like that, according to Gutierrez. And I don't know. I've never seen the letter. I don't know what it in what is all in it, what was written out to. But there was this claim of this Dear John letter, and that my brother had taken it, and that he had it in his home along with the registration. Which why would he have? And I don't know that they ever had proof that he had specifically the registration out of the vehicle, especially when he just searched for the owner of the vehicle.
right.
So there's just so many things
And I agree
that
with you,
didn't
by
make
the way.
sense.
I agree with you that the notion that an 11-year-old knows what a Dear John letter is, when that's a reference that goes back to like the 1950s, and was last used, was last officially used in 1987. That how an 11-year-old knows what a Dear John letter
Right.
is
I know what a
it.
Dear John letter, but I'm like 40 years old. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Seriously, seriously. But that again is a factual question that the jury somehow believed her despite how lacking in credibility she was. And
right.
perhaps part of the reason they believed her is because she grabbed a mantle with respect to the gun.
Hmm.
So there was a point in time where she was testifying about there being some sort of gun that Zachariah allegedly owned, and when she was being cross-examined and to establish that this gun had never been in Wisconsin. This is why I thought he did own a gun in California, because it seemed, from what I could glean based on the back and forth on the stand between your brother's counsel and his daughter, was that this gun had never made it to Wisconsin. And it seems if they were questioning her along those lines to imply that no, this gun was never in Wisconsin. You've never seen this gun. You don't know anything about what this gun looks like. And or what kind of gun it was. I mean, she's probably like, I don't know, by the time the DA was done with her, she's probably identifying the serial number on the gun, and like she's like, of
Right.
course I know that gun. It's serial number 641379. It's like,
Yeah.
how did you know that? Like, but yeah,
Yeah.
what
How would
was
a
so
12-year-old know that?
yeah, right. So that's what I'm saying. As far as her credibility, to me, her credibility was awful, but there was a moment there where when she was recognizing that her testimony sounded very sus, all of a sudden she barks out in front of the jury, I know that gun, I was threatened with that gun.
Yep.
And it's like, whoa, all of a sudden it just turns your brother into some monster who's waving a gun around his own daughter and threatening to, like, beat her or shoot her or whatever, a pistol whip or whatever, some sort of terrible thing for someone to do to their child with a gun, and really do to anyone, but especially their own daughter. That it's like all of a sudden it painted him as being some sort of level A monster that must be defeated, and that to me, the fact that that was that came before this jury, I was sitting there like, wow, how is a jury supposed to look at him fairly at this point? How are they possibly going to look at him fairly when they just hear a little girl up on the stand crying about how the defendant threatened her with a gun, which is not part of the charges or anything like that. We don't know that. They have no reason to know that this gun has ever been in the state of Wisconsin, or that he owns it or ever touched it in his life. And yet the next thing we know, this his daughter, who seems to have very serious issues with Zachariah, was standing up there on the stand claiming, or I don't think she said, "You threatened me with that gun." I don't think she said it was, which would have been,
She didn't. She just said
which
I was threatened
which
with
by the
that
way,
gun.
if she had, it's a shame, in my opinion, that she didn't say, "You threatened me with that gun," because if she had, I think that your chances of mistrial would have been even stronger, like much stronger, because like all this, because now I'm expecting the state is going to try to weasel out of it and say, well, she never said that it was him. Why is that
Yeah.
prejudicial to him? She never said it was him, when everyone knows that's what anyone took from it, that he was the one who threatened with her. When they're trying to link this gun to Zachariah, of course they're going to assume that if she says that she knows this gun and that she was threatened with it, like, who do you think was threatening her? Some classmate was threatening her with Zachariah's gun? That doesn't add up. Anyone would just assume it was Zachariah who did it. And it's so prejudicial. It was so bad that I'm sitting there and I'm just like, how the hell is any jury is going to be looking to punish him now?
Mm-hmm.
And that's to me what's so bothersome, because at the end of the day, we're all supposed to be innocent in the eyes of the law until guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. And what we have here is there's so little evidence, if any evidence, tying Zachariah to a crime that we don't even know for sure happened. For all we know, this dude literally just went Splitsville and is hiding from some drug, moved off to Australia and is hiding from a drug cartel. We don't know that he's dead. We don't know anything of the kind. And it has to be that when we say guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, this is, to my mind, what that really means. It's like, why is it not guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, which is what a lot of people mistakenly think it is? Why is it not that? It's because it really should be that. But we don't want someone to come along with saying, well, could be aliens. You don't know it's not aliens. So in order to remove that sort of crazy, thought exercise to find excuse to exonerate anyone who's a murderer, so we basically say beyond a reasonable doubt. But the point is, you cannot have a reason to doubt the person's guilt. If you have a reason to doubt this person's guilt, to think perhaps, you know what, maybe there's another explanation here. Perhaps someone else did it. Perhaps his mom she got mad when she found out that he's two-timing, and then hired a couple, and then basically got into a fight and ended up killing him, and then hired a couple people to move the body for her. I mean, we know this. The guy weighed 270, 280 pounds. And ultimately, the body was removed by being rolled up into a carpet, right?
That's what it was alleged, because the carpet was missing and he's missing. His shoes are missing. His glasses are missing.
Right. I cannot, and your brother also has a bad back, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
he's had a bad back since he had a workplace injury when he worked for AT&T.
When was that, his bad back injury?
I want to say about 2018, give or take.
Right. Okay. So he's been dealing with a bad back injury for years, and we're supposed to believe that he single-handedly basically dragged, or one way or another,
deadlifted. There's no drag marks. There's no blood smear. There's nothing. There's no marks on doors. No marks on trim. He would have had to have shoulder. It's the weight of the man plus all of his belongings plus the weight of the carpet, right? So we're talking 300 pounds, dead man weight, rolled up in a carpet on his shoulder and out the door.
Which, how would any person? I don't even know how two people would do that when it's in a car. It's gonna be really, really hard. You ever try moving 150 pounds if it's two people? How is it one person could possibly have moved 300 pounds on their shoulder without dragging? That you're moving 300 pounds, and there's no evidence tying him to this crime, and he is now spending the rest There's no, I mean, the only physical evidence we have is a speck of some DNA. We're not even sure if it's blood that was in his car that we have no reason to know was Zachariah's any more than it was Rosalio's any more than 4 billion other men who are walking this planet.
Right.
But and it most likely is actually Zachariah's own DNA, but there was too little of a scrape there for them to actually be able to test it properly. And now he's spending the next 50 years in prison because
Yep.
his daughter said she saw him spying through a window on his former girlfriend, on her,
On his baby
on her,
mama. Yeah.
on his baby mama. That was the term I was
Yeah.
looking for. Thank you. I mean, this is horrifying to me. There are so many explanations which make more sense than saying Zachariah did this alone. That
Yep.
that for a jury to say, we don't just think he did it, we are positive beyond a reasonable doubt that he's the one who murdered
Yep.
them, is a terrifying thing as far as how easily juries can be manipulated. And to basically saying, you know what, yeah, I guess it makes sense. Okay, let's find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a terrifying, terrifying thing for our justice system. And all those people are sitting there and saying, well, let justice play out. Let justice play out. This should be a wake-up call to you that our justice system, it might be better than any other on earth. I don't know. It could be, but it is highly, highly flawed when there's so little evidence tying him to this.
Yeah.
Let me just catch up on a few super chats here.
Sure,
Julio
sure.
says, Solomon made my eyes water when he read what a-hole Schroeder refused to hear. What a-hole Schroeder refused to hear. Love to Anderson family, and thanks for bringing Sal on. Spread the word about the injustice that has happened. Hashtag free Zachariah Anderson. Amen. Also, I want to thank you, and she was for the super chat here. Also, Julie adds, I had L5/S1 herniated disc. That's in the lower back, L5/S1, and surgery. And there's no way I am all spry the day after some lifting stuff. I'm damn sure not in Walmart at the crack of dawn buying sardines. That was another thing they brought up, that he had like new rope or something like that.
Yeah, they claimed that he had rope and duct tape on a chair in the basement that was no longer there. Now there was clutter on that chair. There's still to this day clutter on that chair. No rope or duct tape, but there's other clutter. But no rope or duct tape. They claim that rope and duct tape went missing, and that he then went to Walmart after searching for when the store opened, and he bought his murder kit. They then played 32 minutes of footage of him driving into a Walmart parking lot, parking right next to one, if not two other vehicles, strolling casually into Walmart, walking around in a relaxed way, buying trash bags, some sardines, Q-tips, some Lysol wipes. There's two varieties of Lysol wipes, and one or two other things, and then he casually pays for his things, pays cash for his things, and then he walks casually back out to his car, loads his purchases, and drives away. So they spent 32 minutes of real-time footage watching him have a casual shopping trip. Mentioning the sardines, oddly enough, in the news articles, this is another lie that the DA's office told. They said that the can of sardines was open in his vehicle underneath the driver's seat, implying that he had opened a can of sardines so that the strong smell of sardines would overpower the smell of anything that he had done in the van. This is why
I was always wondering what these sardines were all about.
Yep, this is why during the sentencing they pushed for the correction of that, because they specifically misrepresented this. The DA's office lied about these sardines in their statements to the public, and tried to paint it that my brother was trying to cover up this heinous crime, that it was absolutely indicative of it. And it was just like it was a clear lid on a can of sardines. It was a snack for him. It was his lunch that he
And
put
the
in the
reason you
van.
mentioned that he was casually doing this is because this allegedly happened after, in the eyes of the state, after he allegedly murdered Rosalio, that he now was purchasing a cleanup kit in the form of rope and duct tape.
Not rope and duct tape, but the trash bags and Lysol wipes.
Oh, the trash bags and but what I don't understand is, why did he get the rope? what was the rope and duct tape? That was to allegedly, I guess, roll a body in a carpet.
Yeah, to roll him up and secure him. To my understanding.
Right, and that was another thing his daughter testified about, that she remembers seeing that. Like, she
Yeah.
specifically remembers seeing that. Like, that's why they wanted to tie her, that she had been there, because she specifically remembered seeing these things that they couldn't find anymore.
Right.
Yeah, no. So Joe said no witness saw the blood on the Rosalia's door on May 18th, despite being in plain view and inches from the tenants' mailboxes. Can you talk about this a little bit?
So in the crime scene photos, Rosalia's front door in the main apartment, not the patio slider, but when you walk in the front door, there's a flight of stairs that goes up, and his door is underneath the flight of stairs. Okay,
Okay.
and to the right of his front door is the bank of mailboxes for
Wait. So,
mail delivery.
so wait. You walk up a flight of stairs.
Not up the flight of stairs. You walk past the flight of stairs.
Okay.
So you walk past the flight going up, and
Okay.
underneath in the area below the stringers is all 8 mailboxes for that apartment building.
Okay.
So when you're looking at the door, to the
Mhm.
right of that door, there's a bunch of mailboxes. Does that make
Okay.
sense? Like buried in the wall.
Right. Okay.
On the trim of the door, and there's a couple of dots on the door. There's blood splatter, like some streaking blood, and a couple of dots of blood on the door properly. So no one claimed that they had seen a mailman. I don't know if the police had interviewed a mailman, but nobody claimed that they had noticed when getting their mail, when walking up right next to that door on the 18th at all. Had nobody had seen anything that resembled blood on that door on May the 18th of 2020. There was no witness that claimed that they did. And there's, frankly, I guess, no witness that claimed that they didn't either. But there's no one that comes forward and says that I absolutely saw blood. It was there. There's no evidence that's presented that confirms that on May the 18th, which is the day after he allegedly was murdered, that there's blood on that door at all.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So in this situation, that the gravely misrepresented a bunch of evidence that was presented during the trial. He outright lied. He inferred that my brother's silence was his opportunity to speak of his innocence during closing arguments.
And
All of these are problems.
I want to get to that, because that's the next thing I want to cover, actually. So that's something that you were talking to me about right before we started the show, which is that Gravely was looking to go as close to the line as possible with respect to infringing on your brother's rights to remain silent, and that
Yeah,
he said he actually asked the judge for.
permission twice. He asked the judge for permission to get as close to violating my brother's Fifth Amendment right as possible, and then I believe to get as close to violating his Sixth Amendment right as possible too. I'd have to go back and look
Well,
at it, but
in what form would he have been doing that?
so he said, he asked the judge that he wants to be able to approach this is a very delicate matter, and I want to be able to approach this without crossing the line. How close to the line can I get? So he's asking the judge for permission to approach, to infer that my brother's right to silence meant guilt, and that to infer that the defense should have done their own investigation.
What?
So yeah, absolutely. He actually made the statement
And
that
this
he
is something that the public loves to think about. They're like, well, if he didn't do it, who did? As if that's the burden of the defense to establish why it is that Rosalio is missing.
yeah,
Which,
that they
honestly,
actually
between you and me, my hunch really is Sadie. I'm not going to kid you. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm expressing. This is not. I'm not making a statement of fact. I'm not making a claim. I'm not
it's a
making an allegation.
supposition. I
I'm
get it.
saying is my best supposition here is that Sadie basically was just like that. She knows something that she's. That's my own personal speculation. I don't know Sadie. You know her. I don't know her. I'm simply saying there's a lot of things here which don't really make a lot of sense. And having this, get pinned all of a sudden now, she starts reporting him for stalking. and the daughter is poisoned against Zachariah. There's a lot of things here that make me question whether Sadie is involved in Rosalio's and we have motive, you have motive and opportunity, which is in any crime drama. And again, I'm not making a claim of fact. No one should say. I'm not saying that she's a murderer. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm simply saying that for purposes of trying to determine guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, there's far more that ties, in my opinion, there's far more that ties Sadie to this crime than there is Zach, because she has the motive here based on the guy cheating on her. She has the opportunity, that she has access to everything here. I don't know. She certainly couldn't have dragged that body, she deadlifted that on her own. I'm assuming she's not some sort of weightlifter or something like that. I don't. She's not, right?
No, she's not that big. No.
Right. So
She-
so if in fact she was involved, there's no way she could have done this on her own. But I'm saying is it could have been some cartel thing. It could have been anything. It literally could have been anything. Or the guy could have just skipped town. I mean, he could have gotten into a fight and felt threatened that, like, maybe he did lose a hand, like, maybe some people he was associated with came in there and basically roughed him up really bad, and the dude skipped town, afraid that he's going to get killed, and and the next and Zach being pinned for his murder is just gravy on top of it. So to me, there's so many different explanations as to what can happen here, and so little physical evidence tying Zach to this crime. So there's no eyewitness, there's no body, there's no physical evidence that's actually tying Zachariah to this crime. And the jury said, we do not have any doubt that he's the one who murdered Rosalio. To me, that's astonishing. It's astonishing how this could have happened.
Yeah, we were astonished too, completely shocked. I was sitting there watching this trial, thinking I could see how a juror could take this and then convict my brother for stalking Sadie, but there was no evidence, none presented that actually outlined that he had done anything to Rosalio at all. There's this one spot in the back of the van that they claim that I mean to my understanding that Judge Schroeder allowed them to claim was blood when there was no scientific testing to verify it. None. So that they had just enough to test it for it being a single source male that tested positive for Rosalio's blood. That's what I believe Lisa Treffinger said. So they didn't give any statistics. They didn't break down the likelihood of it being Rosalio's blood compared to a panel of other people. Nothing else was discussed. Just that it tested positive for Rosalio's blood, that they believed that it was, and that it was a single source male. But then they luminoled the entire van, and there's this rust colored stain on the driver's side rear panel. It's by the driver's side rear sliding door. It's on the steering wheel. It's on the visor above the steering wheel. There's this substance that's all over the van, this brownish red stain, that another crime lab expert comes forward and says there was no blood in the van. No blood in the van. Her words, no blood in the van. All of the luminol testing came back negative. The state tried to make the argument that the carpet was removed from the back like 3 feet of the van based on the idea that there was blood pool on that carpet, so what needed to be removed. But there's still hardware there. There's still the brackets for the back seats. There's still bolts and all kinds of stuff for blood that had pooled and saturated a carpet, for that to have gotten into and touched. Nothing lit up with luminol. The back of the van is
And you would think if he wiped
black.
everything down, they would find the wipes and test the wipes and see if there's anything there. You would think that there's ways that they could. I mean, there something. I mean, it's the lack of their ability to find any evidence here, to me, is such an indictment on the state's case that the idea that he was convicted of this is just it's so horrifying.
I mean,
It's so.
keep in mind that
By the way, I forgot. I want to pitch out. Is there any sort of fund for his appeal that I can help promote here?
there is. We have a Give Send Go. So Give Send Go.
Why don't you put the link in the private chat, and I'll pin it, and I'll add it to the description here, so
Sure,
that because I'm sure that your legal bills must be through the roof.
It's increasing because we have to order all the transcripts, and I'm sure that you understand how
Yeah,
expensive that endeavor is.
yeah,
So we have to order the transcripts not just from the trial, but we also have to order them for all of the hearings before the trial. We have to order them for the mistrial. We have to order them for the civil court case where they went to court because Sadie had testified in the civil case about things and got the restraining order and took the kids away from my brother in that case. So all of those transcripts must be procured. So all of that stuff is kind of coming down to the wire. We need to be able to order all of that information to build his appeals case.
yeah. I can only imagine. I'm trying to. I got a message from MLS telling me that I don't have mods in the chat, which frankly, unfortunately, tend to have a pretty healthy chat here, which I don't really. And the whole mod thing has so much. It's such a headache. I can't even tell you. But I will add MLS as a mod and take care of that. Commands block. I will tell you that with respect to modding, my general parameter is with respect to the chat. I urge people to my mods to show discretion and recognize my 3 rules are that people should not that the 3 rules are no spamming, no violating terms of service, and no racism. But if people want to hate on me or hate on my guests, I don't. I'm a big believer in free speech. So,
Hmm.
and if my guests are uncomfortable with the chat, you don't have to be watching the chat. I don't know anything. All I've seen for you is tremendous love, but it could be that some people, have issues with Zach or you and are not displaying the love. And if anything is bothering you, you don't have to be watching the chat. I'm
I've
not
got,
so, and that's my rule for all my guests. So
yeah,
so basically, I'm going to urge you to please and I give out the wrench very sparingly, like really sparingly. I trust David, so but I give it out really sparingly, and one of the reasons is because I don't want there to be heavy moderation in my chat. I think that
sure.
I'm not a free speech absolutist, but I'm a very big advocate for as wide free speech as can possibly be afforded to
Yeah.
my chat.
I mean, for the record, I believe in free speech as well, but I also believe that what Sadie did in her accusation and in trying to incorporate my brother is a dangerous use of free speech.
That's
This
a
is this is a borderline thing. This is a borderline issue. For
right.
and I'm okay with people that are victims of violence and things like that. People that that need to go to someone for help. Truthfully, they need to be able to get help. But if they're lying, if they're perjuring, there should be
Right.
consequence. This is not okay, right?
Yeah, agreed. I'm pinning this in my chat here that I'm pinning the Give Send Go. I'm also going to incorporate this link in the description so those of you who are joining afterwards can if you're inclined to help support the defense on the appeal of Zachariah. In that case, you can follow the link there. And yeah, I'm gonna tell you this. Do I know? I'm being real with you here, Solomon. Do I know for certain that your brother did not do this? No, I don't know that. I mean, there's no way. I wasn't there. I don't know your brother personally, and even if I knew you personally, there's no way I could say that you didn't do it. I don't know you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you seem like a nice, upstanding guy. But what I do know is this: no murderer should be convicted on this level of evidence. No, even if someone actually did do it, our justice system demands that there actually be evidence for the worst of us. Again, sufficient against the worst of us, all the more so the best of us. So I honestly, do I know he didn't do it? No. Do I care? No, because I think that the evidence here is hot garbage. So, and that we as Americans should be saying, you know what, we're demanding more of our jury system. That our jury system should that our criminal justice system should actually live up to the highfalutin claims that we continually express about innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And in my estimation, I cannot fathom how this low level of evidence here could possibly be interpreted as anyone is like, oh, yes, certainly this defendant, beyond a reasonable doubt, committed the crimes of which he's been accused. And it offends my notions of fairness and justice and a belief in our American judicial system. And that's why I say that, look, even if you have questions and you don't trust Zachariah or Solomon or anyone, at the very least, you should have enough will to see a healthy American judicial system that you don't just convict someone until you actually have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that warrants a conviction.
I think that we've discussed this topic a couple of times, and I really appreciate the verbiage that you are supposed to be in our justice system innocent unless proven guilty, right? And that is, and unless proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt, right? And the threshold for that tier of certainty is well past probably, is well past suspectedly, is well past I think that they did it. It is I believe with all certainty that this person committed this crime. And that doesn't matter if it's murder or any other crime that you're charged with in our legal system. This is the onus of proof the state has. This is why they have an unlimited budget. This is why they have expanded rights to be able to search, seize, question, and detain, because they're supposed to be able to get the truth. They're supposed to be able to dig up evidence and bring that to court to prove beyond reasonable doubt that this person committed this crime, and they did not do that. They spent thousands of man hours. They had 15 police agencies that investigated my brother, and they came back with this fluff of a non-existent case that gravely spun, lied, twisted, and misled the jury into a guilty conviction, with Judge Schroeder just sitting there and letting him do it. That was all it was.
So much so that he knew how awful his case was, which is why he's pushing to get evidence about the marijuana plants in there. It's why he's pushing to be allowed to breach your brother's Fifth Amendment rights by implying to a jury that, hey, if he was innocent, he would have taken the stand, and he had a chance to tell his story here, but he didn't. So clearly he must have been. Clearly he's hiding, and you know why he didn't. It's because he's guilty. All of these are noxious to a healthy American judicial system. And the fact that his lack of evidence, and this is what I find to be the case all the time, is the less evidence they have, the more they try using improper means to try and convict, which means it's not about getting justice. It's a matter of saying, well, we need to get the scalp any way we can. And if we can't do it because we can dig up sufficient evidence, we're going to try and circumvent our own rules as much as possible to get that scalp, because we need a scalp to hang on the wall. And that's how this whole thing reads. Why the hell would Gravely be pushing in this particular case to start trying to come as close as possible to trampling on his Fifth Amendment rights, if not for the fact that Gravely was very concerned that any jury would look at this slim margin of evidence and say, oh my God, why the hell would I think he's guilty beyond reasonable doubt? You don't have any DNA, there's no body, there's no eyewitness, there's no anything here, there's no implication he ever met the dude. And it's like it's asinine. We have crazy story here with Sadie mysteriously stumbling on the site here and immediately pointing the finger at Zach as if, oh, he's definitely the one who did it. Like, let me ask you this. I mean, I don't want to ask you this question because I told you I'm gonna dance. I'm just saying, there's no evidence there was no evidence presented at trial to indicate that he's violent or in hostile and that sort of nature. So that was where I was going to ask. I was like, wait, I can't ask you that question.
Yeah, that was actually very specifically part of the post-sentence investigation where they had said that none of the charges that have ever been brought against him show any history of violent tendencies. None of it was there.
And all of
So
a sudden, he's a murderer who has expertise in how to remove a body and
exactly.
not leave a trace of evidence. All of a sudden, he went from a guy who's never been convicted of any sort of violent offenses, and next thing you know, the dude's Dexter, and he's just like he's got his kill room, and he's able to like
Yep.
hack up a body and get rid of it. Somehow miss a big massive blood stain in the middle of the room there, and when he's getting rid of this body and lugging out 300 pounds over his bad back and getting rid of all the clothing and the body and all evidence, all trace evidence in his car. It's like beyond a reasonable doubt. A unanimous jury, beyond a reasonable doubt. Tell me our justice system isn't flawed.
It's surreal. It's surreal. I mean, well, one of our group members actually pointed out that that in one of the crime scene photos, that there's a diffuser sitting on the little table that's right in front of the door when you would have walked into Rosalio's apartment. So like you walk in and the door swings to the left. Behind that door is the entry to the kitchen, and then right in front of that door, right kind of on your front left, there's a small table. On that small table, there was a diffuser, a little wooden sort of bulb thing that's sitting there. During the crime scene photographs, it
What
is
is a
still
diffuser exactly? I'm not sure what that is.
it's like aromatherapy, something
Oh,
that you
okay.
use to make your home
Oh,
smell good.
diffuser,
Like
DIFF.
yeah,
Like
diffuser.
it's diffusing
It's
scent into the
diffusing,
air.
yeah, diffusing scent
Okay.
in the air.
I'm
So
thinking diffuser, like there's no fuse. It's like it's
no,
not.
no, 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 no.
Okay.
It's a diffuser.
Okay.
So, uh,
New
so
Yorker. Sorry. Go on.
yeah, it makes sense. I get it. So it's steaming still during the crime scene photographs. The crime scene photographs were taken on May 19th, somewhere maybe between 12 and 1 p.m., like noon to 1 p.m., somewhere in that time range, right?
Mhm.
If you zoom in on the photograph, both lights, both indicator lights are on this diffuser, on this scent diffuser. This thing is running on high, so it's running on high and it's still steaming on the 19th. They allege that this thing was filled and ran for around, give or take, 40 hours from about 9 p.m. when Rosalio got home from dropping his children off, was on the phone, was preparing for Macias to come over, that he had filled it. He was murdered at 10 p.m. This is what was alleged. And then this diffuser is still running on the 19th. 40 hours later, it's still steaming on this table.
That doesn't seem to. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That we have some people that ordered the diffuser to run other tests on it. If it was on a timer, it wouldn't reactivate because you have to choose which power setting. There's a bunch of other issues that come up with this. This thing could not have run for 40 hours. It doesn't add up.
So
So
let me ask you this without locking in. I don't want to ask you what Zach's opinion is on this. Do you personally, and this is your own individual opinion, this is not a statement on behalf of the defense, so I don't there's no way it could be imputed to Zach himself. Do you have a theory about this whole thing? Because you mentioned this thing with the diffuser. Do you have a theory as to what actually happened here? And obviously you might not have proof to it, but if you have some sort of theory as to what happened here that you can share with us, I'd be curious to hear that.
so I think that someone did assault him on the night of the 17th. My opinion and my breakdown of what I saw in the evidence. There's two beer
Mm-hmm.
bottles that are out, two beer bottles opened, and there's a water. Somebody came over. He invited them in. They were hanging out there talking. The conversation didn't go the way he wanted it to. He asked them to leave. He had just bought his children baseball supplies. There's a bat laying there. They decide to rob him. They hit him in the head. They dump him onto the couch. He's laying on the couch. He's bleeding. They don't realize how bad the injury is. They rob him. They take whatever's left of the $1,000 that he had pulled out of the bank that his mother had put into the joint bank account that he had withdrawn just a few days prior. They take that money. When they're going through his wallet, they accidentally grab a couple of the credit cards. They don't want him to call for help immediately. So they walk over to the fridge, the freezer. They still have the credit cards in hand. They throw the credit cards with the phone into the freezer. They take the money. They leave. They leave out the patio door. They lock the door. They take off. Okay.
So this all
Now,
happens on the 17th.
I hypothesize that the robbery happened on the 17th, that the argument and the robbery happened on the 17th. That correlates with the thumping that they heard in the scuffle on the 17th that the upstairs neighbor heard. So
Okay.
around 10, somewhere between 10 and 11 p.m., she testified that she heard a scuffle and that there was an issue, and then it only lasted a couple of minutes, and then it was over. So then he's robbed. They leave. He's got a head wound. He's bleeding. He's bleeding into his mouth. Okay. He's delirious. He gets up. He goes to the door. He gets blood on the handle. He falls backwards onto the carpet where he lays there and breathes, maybe flailing a little bit, semi-conscious, flails blood all over the place. It looks like blood spray because he's just kind of half conscious, trying to figure out what's happening. His brain is disconnecting. He's delirious. He's spitting blood out, and it's spraying on this nightstand, on this table that's right by the door. He expires. He bleeds out right there. That's what the pool of blood is that's laying there. It's about 6 feet 7 inches, give or take, from the entry door back to the pool of blood on the edge of the carpeting. Someone comes back on the 18th. They realize that what was done to him actually killed him. They panic. They figure out what to get. They wrap him up. There's an argument between two people that are there. That's overheard by a neighbor. There's a woman standing on the patio that asked for the time at 4:21 p.m. on the 18th. They
I mean,
like
there's
the
a woman on the
diffuse.
patio. What's that? What's that
There was
about?
an anonymous tip that there was a woman standing on Rosalio's patio outside of the sliding doors at about 4:20 something p.m. on the afternoon of May the 18th. So they've panicked. They're trying to figure out what to do. They're trying to figure out how to get this body out of there. She's standing on the patio trying to figure out how they can move the body. Someone walks past. She goes, "Oh, would you mind telling me what time it is?" Trying to make
It's
it look
4:16.
innocuous.
My audience is saying 4:16.
4:16.
That's what they're saying. That's
Perfect.
what they're saying.
4:16.
Okay,
So I misremembered by 10 minutes.
that's okay. 5
Yeah,
minutes.
that's my wife saying, "Saul, get your shit straight."
Okay.
So she asks what time it is, right? This is an anonymous tip. She gets the coast clear. They take the body out. They light the diffuser because there's a smell. Because not everybody fills their shorts when they die, but maybe he did. They leave the patio door open so it airs out. They
Hmm.
make it out. They get rid of the body in the dump or wherever it is.
Hmm. Interesting.
So now you have all of the there's three different pieces of evidence, four technically, with Sadie saying that the crime scene didn't look the way it did the day before. That's what she said on the stand, which might have been just her meaning that it was the day before the 17th. On the 16th when she was last there, maybe that was just her misstating something, a slip of the tongue. That's possible, but she did say the day before when she testified on the stand, which could imply the 18th. She claimed that she knew that he was a missing person on the 18th. Her testimony stated that she knew that he was a missing person on the 18th. And then she sort of backed those words up and said, "Well, I just had a gut feeling because he wasn't answering the phone." After 12 hours?
Right.
Why do you think he's a missing person after 12 hours? Why is your paranoia so high that this is where you're at? That you think that something had gone horribly wrong after 12 hours of not hearing from this man? That is suspicious.
Right.
Because the day before she had expressed to him that she had stronger feelings, that she wanted to take it to the next level. And for all she would know is that he ghosted her because he gave her what is in text message a fist bump. He hearted the message. He didn't, give her any reciprocity.
Right.
He like liked the message and moved on. Cool story, bro. And then he
Yeah.
invites another girl over that night.
Wow.
So we have a bunch of situations that are testified to and presented to. We have multiple people who have changed their testimony to fit Michael Gravely's story,
Narrative. Yeah.
his narrative. After
Yeah.
they meet with him, after they have conversations with him, it's a problem that this DA has made himself a witness in this case by meeting with Narita Macias, going to the apartment building with her personally, and then changing her testimony based on what he saw. He's inserted himself as a witness and then refused to recuse himself from the case. It is completely unethical. And then the judge refuses to remove him from the case, knowing that the prosecutor made himself a witness.
And we didn't even get to this part.
No, we didn't.
We didn't even get to this part of because that could be a reversible error. Wow.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And not just for Narita Macias, they also met with the jailhouse snitch with no body cameras, no footage.
Oh yeah,
nothing.
we didn't get to the jailhouse snitch thing, which was the most ludicrous thing in the world. So to be fair and to the eyes of the jury, assuming you want to try and so we can flesh out for anyone else, for anyone who did not get to see the trial. From what I understand, a jailhouse snitch is someone that your brother didn't talk to anyone the entire time he was in prison.
Yeah,
But
he's maintained his innocence for 3 years, and after about 2 years, he decides that he's going to unload to this one man because he had talked in his sleep this one time. That
yeah,
was what was presented.
supposedly he talked in his sleep, and that he was screaming in his sleep or something like that, and that when he woke up, his cellmate said, that he was admitting that he did it in his sleep, and he's like, he said, I looked in his eyes and I said, "Tell me the truth, you did it." And he said, and that Zachariah admitted that he killed him. Like that's exactly, because I can tell you right now, the number of times in a prison that any prisoner said to a virtual stranger cellmate that they're looking in the eyes, looking in the
what
eyes.
Is this, a
Like
Lifetime show?
It's like a romantic moment. It's like
so ridiculous.
It's like that scene where it's like, let me tell you something. It means you're gay. Like that meme of like
Yeah.
the thing. Like that's how I'm picturing like this moment, the way it's being described. Let me tell you.
Yeah. So he goes, yeah, you said it in your sleep, and then Zach got down from his bunk, and he said, oh, did I really say it? He said, yeah, you said it. And he said, look me in the eyes, tell me that you did it. And then he looked me in the eyes and he said, yeah, I did it. Right? like what? It's a poorly written drama. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
It,
It's so bad.
It's completely outlandish. It
so
holds
bad.
no water. But the reality is that the second jailhouse snitch, the second guy that they brought in, was offered the same deal, but he refused it. This is a thing that was important that I think that the jury missed, is that this prosecutor was willing to troll the jail for anyone that was willing, anyone that had
To come
spent
up with
time
some sort of
my brother, to
story.
come up with anything that they could bring to court, because they had such a non-existent case. This was part of his strategy. On top of that, mixing up the jury with how he asked about the DNA evidence. He specifically asked about the DNA evidence found on my brother's clothes, then jumped to the DNA evidence on the front door of Gutierrez's home, and then jumped to another location, trying to get the jury to misremember the facts, trying to place some of my brother's DNA on the crime scene, which was never there. Moreover, exculpatory evidence was presented during the case. They presented that there were two alleles that had a 0% match to my brother and a 0% match to Gutierrez, found on Gutierrez's phone. They had found two alleles that did not match my brother. This is exculpatory. Someone that was there, that committed the crime, put it in the freezer. It is DNA evidence that did not match my brother. They should never, ever have come to a guilty verdict.
Honestly, with the amount with what we're seeing here, this whole thing never should have gone to trial. This is terrible. This is such an injustice. There's so little evidence here. Okay, so let me just jump to it. Seems today the defense needs to prove the client's not guilty, which is why Kyle was found not guilty and Zach was found guilty. The state can violate rights with no consequences. Shame on the DA and the judge. Unfortunately, that does seem to be the state of our judicial system. Because did you get to watch the Kyle Rittenhouse trial?
I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw.
But I'm saying is, if not for the fact that there was so much evidence exonerating him, it's hard to imagine he ever would have been found not guilty.
Right.
And I was actually I was saying on other streams that like it seems as if like because a lot of people who are rooting for Kyle to be properly exonerated, and that he ultimately was, that people who watch the trial tend to think of Judge Schrader as being someone who was, some great kind of trial judge. And yeah, I had a different issue of him walking out of the Rittenhouse trial before this, that I was like, yeah, the point to a judge, a good judge is supposed to be a gatekeeper to keep out information that could wrongfully lead a jury to conclude to reach their conclusion. And there was a lot of evidence in the Rittenhouse trial which got in there, which never should have come in my opinion. I was like, this is terrible. I mean, the out of focus pictures were blown up with pixels inserted, and it's like, and the DA is inserting these pixels, and when they're sharing the picture with the defense, they give them a different copy of the picture than what they end up using before the jury. I mean, and it's like, and drawing all these ridiculous conclusions from one still moment, that this is like, oh, obviously that Rosenbaum saw this, and in that one frame of a half frozen, and that's why he reacted the way. It's like the most ridiculous theories in the world, and changing of stories as to what it is that different people were thinking from the start to the finish, which lets you know that they're not happy with the way the case is going. So many different things that were just happening in the Rittenhouse trial, that I was just like, how is the judge letting all this stuff in? I mean, when Binger was up there basically doing the same thing as Gravely, which apparently this is like endemic in the Kenosha County DA office, of like, let's trample all over people's Fifth Amendment rights and imply to a jury that there's something wrong with a witness who doesn't want to just come spilling his guts to the police, in complete violation of the Fifth Amendment, and they basically decide to keep throwing that in front of the jury and as much as possible. It's astonishing. And Schrader basically, he might scream about it, but nothing happens. I mean, nothing happens. Yep. So what if you're going to keep conducting yourself that way, you're encouraging the DA to continually just keep doing the same thing and push that envelope, so they can get as many scalps as possible, irrespective of whether or not they've actually earned them, or there's enough evidence there to support a claim of to support a conviction of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yep, that's exactly what he did in this case. He let Gravely continue to violate the law, continue to push up against the violating my brother's rights repeatedly during the trial. He did nothing about it. There was a moment where Gravely is busted mouthing simultaneously the die testimony at the same time with the witness. He's mouthing along with them.
Yeah. Which is like, it's like he's like putting the words in his mouth as he's testifying.
Yeah.
That was the jailhouse snitch, that when he was talking about what happened, you hear the witness testifying, and on the camera you see Gravely, the DA, mouthing along with him. He's like saying, what did you hear him say in his sleep? And as the guy is saying it, you see you see Gravely going like it's like this. It's like a play. It's a play.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, to the point where Schroeder takes the USB that was presented to him with that evidence on it by the defense, and he says, I'm keeping this, and then sits back and goes, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
Does nothing about it. He just pockets it, moves on like it never happened. It was an absolute opportunity for him to do something about it. There was no reprimand. There was no consequence. Nothing happened. He denied in pretrial hearings, he denied a Denny motion that fulfilled all three requirements for it to be a Denny motion. He still denied it. Now
you have to explain what a Denny motion is.
So a Denny motion is a motion in the state of Wisconsin where you point the finger at another perpetrator that had the motive, the opportunity, and the means to commit the crime. So if you can outline all three of those with facts, if you have evidence that outlines all three of them, you can present it to the court, and you can motion for the court to consider it as something to include in your defense. It's getting
the jury, so the jury can say, we don't have to get beyond reasonable doubt, because for all we know, it wasn't the defendant, it was this other person.
It was this guy over here. And you don't have to prove that it was this other guy. You just have to provide that this other person had all three things required that they should have been looked at and could be a guilty
I
party.
was talking with
So
Michigan Law Show about this whole thing. He was,
it
because I don't do criminal defense. That's not my area of expertise. But he was like,
sure.
he was saying he never heard of such a thing as far as it being a Denny motion. I think it was he who I was talking to. It might have been someone else, but that he never heard of such that there is no such thing in Michigan, and that this is it's a weird thing that you have to meet that hurdle instead of just being able to throw it in front of the jury and like just say, hey, look, consider these factors as to why it is that you might that they have every reason to think that it's X instead of being the defendant.
Yep.
So
So
yeah.
during that hearing,
Hmm.
Michael gravely describes the person, Michael Campbell, as a hero. Michael Campbell is one of the people that drives to my brother's house to confront and threaten him on the night of the 19th of May.
Hmm.
So after Michael Campbell is told to not interfere with a police investigation, he posts on Facebook, contact the Kenosha PD in regard to Rosario Gutierrez being missing. Call them or call me. Here's my cell phone number. He posts that on the internet. Then he drives up to my brother's home with his friend Brandon, and they approach my brother. Brandon has a pistol that I believe was in the vehicle that was lied about on the stand. So they
Hmm.
drive up there and they confront my brother, assuming that he's not a dangerous man himself. That they're going to show up, the two of them, and rough him up and
Right.
find out what happened, something along those lines.
Right.
So so then Michael Campbell is the topic of this Denny motion because of a bunch of other things that I can't get into. But
Hmm.
but but Michael Gravely describes Mike Campbell as a hero for interfering with a police investigation, which, to my understanding, is a crime.
Yeah.
So he commits a crime. He interferes with the police
I mean, I don't know if it's a
investigation,
crime in Wisconsin. I'm not
and
familiar with, but it's to me
I,
it sounds criminal.
and describes him as a hero that he put his own his health and safety at risk to confront this monster of a man.
Unbelievable.
This is his hot take on a guy interfering with a police investigation. How does the judge look at this and go, you know what, Gravely, you're correct. I'm going to deny this motion.
Unbelievable. Sherry Lawless says, I'm late, so apologies were addressed. In many states, the primary home and vehicle are 100% protected from wrongful death lawsuits. Also, the home can be sold to a family MBR in exchange for an IOU, so no money exchanged. So wrongful death obviously would be a civil suit that would be filed in theory against Zach by the estate of Rosalia Gutierrez. I don't. Is there a pending lawsuit against him for wrongful death?
Not yet. I'm sure there will be.
Right.
There's no death certificate yet,
Hmm.
so technically Gutierrez is still missing.
Right.
They have no body. They have no death certificate. It's a tragedy for his family that
Hmm.
the police did such a poor investigation.
Yeah.
Had they actually searched the landfill, that they actually had police standing by at.
Hmm.
So the landfill where they took the dumpster from the Wood Creek Apartments
Hmm.
is it goes to a landfill in Illinois where it's
Okay.
dumped. The
Okay.
police went to this landfill and they had sequestered a section of it to search it for any evidence or Rosalio's body.
Okay.
They let it go as soon as they heard there was carpet missing in the back of my brother's van. They didn't even bother searching.
Wow.
So they let that go. They didn't bother testing the shoe rack that was leaned up against the wall next to Rosalio's apartment door that had blood splatter or spray behind it. They didn't bother testing any of there's two tables that worked as coffee tables that used to be sitting on the rug that was missing. They were moved over to the end of the couch by the blinds by the patio door. There's blood spray behind those doors or behind those tables on the blinds by the door. It's there's so many things that they just didn't bother investigating. They didn't bother checking the handle of the freezer. None of that was done by this police agency or
Unbelievable.
all 15 of them. They didn't bother testing any of it. Not even the light switches. They didn't care to testing the light, to swapping the light switches when the lights were off, when they alleged that this crime was committed at night. So there's all these things that occurred that they just didn't bother testing. And to my knowledge, they didn't even bother swabbing underneath my brother's fingernails when they arrested him. Uh, I don't understand what went on with this police force.
I'll
They
tell you what
did.
it was. I'll tell you what it was. You ever see the movie Usual Suspects?
Yes, of course I have.
Okay, so there's a line in that movie that Kevin Spacey says, which is, if the police think you did it 9 times out of 10, they're going to find that they think that 9 times out of 10 you're going to find you, whoever the police think did it 9 times out of 10 they're going to find that they're right. So, and I think that's what happened here.
Yep.
They start this investigation with a phone call from the girlfriend of the victim, pointing the finger at her ex. And they basically decided, okay, now it's a matter of just proving that he did it, but we know he did it. And there's no real investigation to figure out who his murderer was.
Right.
It was a matter of, we think we know he did it. Now the job is on us to prove it. So
yep.
That's what we saw here.
That's what I've been saying the whole time, is that they just put the blinders on. They had tunnel vision the whole time. They didn't bother looking into anything else. They didn't care to consider any other possibility. Narita Macias was supposedly at the apartment complex the night that he was murdered. They didn't even bother downloading her phone information to double check and make sure that she was in the right location. None of that happened. None of it. When Sadie had texted her best friend Rebecca Jekyll that it would happen in the next week and she wouldn't know when, how, or where, and that occurred a week before Rosario, less than a week before Rosario went missing.
She texted her friend saying she thought that her boyfriend was her new friend is going to get killed.
No, her friend texted her. So Sadie's friend Rebecca texted Sadie that said it's going to happen in the next week. You won't know when, you won't know how, and you won't know where or who. And so she has this text message that
and yet she doesn't
have.
go to the police before anything happens, or report him for being a stalker, or report him for being a stalker, or it's just unbelievable.
They didn't bother looking, and so this was brought up in court, this question, and Rebecca's response is, well, I was being cryptic. And
Why?
Gave no response as to what it meant. Nothing.
Let me get to some super chats. I got to get you on out of here. I'm stuck on the van carpet. Never heard an explanation. Do you have? I mean, your theory. Do you have any theories on that? Not. I don't want you to tell. If your brother talked to you about this again, I don't want to. I don't want to say anything. I'm trying to dance, so I certainly don't want to say anything that might affect your brother in one way or another. But if you want to respond to that, you can. If not, we can just move on to the next thing.
To my understanding, the carpet was cut out because something was spilled in the back of the van that had an obnoxious odor. It was fuel oil, so there was mixed gas that was spilt in the back of the van. That was my understanding. So he cut it out so he wasn't driving around with the smell of gasoline, filling his vehicle because it had saturated the carpet in the back.
Okay. This phone story doesn't make sense unless he had two phones. Also, he could watch his camera and activity on his computer in her home from his smartphone. Do you have any?
They presented that he had multiple phones during the case. He had a couple of Motorola G6s that he owned. And then his primary phone number operated off of a flip phone. That was the number that I always had programmed in my phone, that I had always had. That's why the smartphone was described as the burner phone.
Mm-hmm.
Though the flip phone has no GPS capabilities.
Okay. What happened to guy who posted on Kenosha PD Facebook? He knew who did it. I think his name was Nick.
Yep.
So sorry, brother, is the fall guy. Sadie is sus.
To my understanding, Nick Mercier is the one that posted that he knew who did it. He posted that on the Kenosha Facebook or Kenosha Police Facebook page, and then redacted it very quickly after that. So he had a post where he said that he knew who did it. I believe he finger pointed somebody. He named them and then very quickly redacted it. And then the police never followed up because it was an anonymous tip. So an anonymous tip came in and they said, well, it was anonymous, so why would we follow up? Even though Nick Mercier was arrested repeatedly, was in the police system, was actually at Kenosha Detention Center during the investigation of this trial or investigation of this case. They could have questioned him at any time. They could have tried to offer him a plea deal, anything. The police didn't bother. They didn't care. They knew that they had the guy in custody. They couldn't give a shit.
Good logic. When streaming a trial, how much do you pay attention to the case while also reading chat? Could you recall what is said to make a ruling? Schroeder was caught watching a YouTube stream at the trial. Hashtag free Zachariah Anderson. So you're asking a good question. I can't explain why. And this is something that Solomon mentioned. He's saying that Zachariah, that Judge Schrader was caught watching the trial during the trial. Do you have
That's right.
anything you want to weigh in with on that?
Yeah, it was recorded. It came over the microphone. There was a feedback loop. And I don't know if you could find it on Recovery Addict stream, because it was Recovery Addict that he was streaming. I did an interview with Recovery Addict this morning, and we talked about the case.
Mhm.
But
How did
the
Recovery
reality is,
Addict watch when it happened? How did they react?
he was stunned. He was baffled. So if you go back, you can find some of the clips online. I think some other people had clipped it, but he was kind of stunned. And then I think a day or two later, he had the stream up, and someone had commented, or he had said, if you're watching this right now, scratch your nose. And then very awkwardly, you can see on camera, Judge Schroeder scratches his nose and then goes back to sitting still. Now, I don't have proof that he scratched his nose specifically because of that stream, but it was
Now I'm scratching
coincidentally
my nose.
right when they had asked him to scratch his nose. So in this case, this is totally unprecedented. There's no other case, to my knowledge, where the judge is on the bench paying attention to a live stream of his own case
A live
while
trial.
yeah
A live
while
stream while watching a live
while
trial.
watching the live trial.
It's
And
really bizarre. It's
it's
really
totally
bizarre. Yeah,
why is he so obsessed in it with his own notoriety in his last case, that he got so much press attention off of the Rittenhouse case, that he was interested in seeing what the comments were going to be saying about his execution of the law in my brother's case too?
could be.
I'm just stunned.
Yeah. This case would have been about as strong had they accused a random neighbor, raided their house, and made random possessions into evidence. It's sadly true.
Yep.
The evidence is absurd. Brat stop quality. I don't know what brat stop is, but
I don't know what Brett said.
Saul, Joe needs to hear about diffuser gate. We covered this.
Yeah, I talked about the diffuser still running, which
Yeah,
still
this
implies that somebody was there on the 18th.
Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't make sense how there would still be enough put into a diffuser that it can go at full volume for 40 hours. That sounds to me to be crazy. Angry Yeti says, I have a friend that was legally coerced into pleading guilty to a crime he didn't commit off no more evidence than an accusation. Sadly, that's the state of affairs we're dealing with. Joe, thank you for having Saul on. Ask him about face group and fundraisers. Zach is innocent, deserves justice. So I think we covered, if there's a face group that you want me to share, Facebook group that you want me to share, I can share that as well.
We have a Facebook group as well. Here, I can pull that up for you. Give me a second.
I'll add that in the description down below. So any of you who are interested in following that, by all means. Talk about how they came up with the time of death based on Rosalio not answering texts and how bogus that is. Do you want to address? If you can finish what you're doing, and then you can, if you want to address that.
Sure, I'll just get that there.
We'll come back. I'll come back to that if you want.
It was Zach not answering. I think that they just typed that incorrectly.
Oh, really? About Zach not answering texts?
Yeah. So they said that the time of death was outlined based on my brother taking a nap. So my brother, the kids on that Sunday the 17th, he's got twin boys. They play hard. They always play hard. Trust me, I know the boys play hard.
Okay.
They go full throttle all the time. They're twin boys, and they compete, and they treat you like a jungle gym. They're little wild animals, and I love them with all of my heart. And he plays hard with them every single time he's with them. So I wasn't shocked that he took a nap after Sadie picked up the kids. Not shocked at all. It made perfect sense. He would take a nap. Absolutely. He overslept, and he woke up and texted and called Christine at 11:19 p.m. What the state asserted was that because he had a break in cell phone activity that was roughly 4 hours, that gave him the time to leave his cell phones at home because he had already memorized the route, drive to Kenosha, wait, and then blitz Rosalio at the door, commit the murder at about 10 p.m. So this is what the state has asserted is that Rosalio was killed at around 10 p.m. Right at about 10 p.m. My brother wrapped up Rosalio's body after brutally murdering him with a blunt force object, and then taking a knife out and finishing the job. Right, like he's playing a video game, or that he's a Swiss Army knife. Right.
Right.
And then he takes the body, puts it in the rug, wraps it up cleanly, totally encapsulates it like a cigarette, right?
Right.
Like, think about it, like
Like
a
a
tube.
blunt. Yeah.
Yeah, like a blunt. And then shoulders this body, gets it. This is after he's robbed him, of course, so he's taken all the money out.
Mhm.
Shoulders the body, gets it out to the van, puts it in the van, gets the phone in the freezer, cleans up the rest of his evidence that he's left in the crime scene, grabs all the pieces of the bat or whatever it is that he used to beat Rosalio. Then he locks up the house, and he turns the lights off, and he leaves, and he does all of that in roughly 10 minutes.
Wow.
So this is what they presented, is that at about 10 p.m. he commits the act. By about 10:10, the phone's in the freezer, and he's on his way out the door. This is how efficient of a murderer he is in the state's eyes. This is insanity. And then somehow, even though the drive is
Wow.
1 hour and 9 minutes, okay? Even though
Mhm.
the drive is 1 hour and 9 minutes for him, or 1 hour and 7 minutes to get from Rosalio's door all the way to his home in Mequon to get his phone again, to then respond and call to his girlfriend Christine, even though that drive is just enough time down to the second to be able to get there and respond to his girlfriend, he somehow managed to avoid all the traffic cameras, because the drive time, as they cited, is along the freeway system through Milwaukee, through downtown Milwaukee, where there are traffic cams on the interchanges and on the major thoroughfares. That is avoiding all the gas stations, all the doorbells, all the schools, everything. They found no video evidence of him being outside of his home on the night of the 17th. None. And somehow they presumed, or they presented, that this timeline makes sense in their mind,
Wow.
that this is how this crime was committed, that he then teleported from Kenosha to Mequon, avoiding all these traffic cams. Because if he did drive to avoid all these traffic cams, he would have added a half hour, an hour to his drive time. There's no way, physically impossible,
Which he
for
managed
him
to
to have
do that. He
committed this
managed to
crime.
avoid all those cams without having his phones on him.
Yep. Physically impossible.
Wow. Wow. I'm first hearing this now, but that's actually that's powerfully that's powerful evidence for his exoneration, because it doesn't. I don't even understand how he could have done this. This is just astonishing.
Neither do I. And that's why in his statement to the judge, he said, "Judge, I don't know how to explain this, or I don't know how to defend this. I'm innocent, not guilty. I'm innocent." That's why those words are so powerful,
Yeah.
because it was kangaroo courted into a guilty verdict. This is
Unbelievable.
a mockery, a parody of justice. This is not
Wow.
how our justice system is supposed to work.
Wow.
This is if you were in Bizarro world and tried someone for murder. This doesn't make sense.
This is so wrong. This is so wrong. This is so messed up. Wow. Unbelievable. I never heard the whole timeline thing here, that's how the police. Yeah, I didn't know he lived that far away from Rosalio.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
astonishing.
Like Rosario lives down like a few miles from the Illinois border. My brother lives like an hour away from there. It doesn't make sense. There's
He should
no
have
part
got
of this
he
that
should have
makes
gotten
sense.
a directed verdict if a jury came back with this conviction, like
It,
overturning the jury's finding of and
they
saying
requested it. Schroeder denied
they
it.
always do. They always request, and the judge is never going to give it. He'll never grant
Right.
it.
Yeah,
But
Schroeder was absolutely adamant that he wanted this to be a jury decision. He knew
good.
what game they were playing. He and Gravely knew what game they were playing on that jury, and he was willing to go along with it.
If not answering text from booty call means you were murdered, I've been murdered like 5 times already. Prosecutors need jail time for wrongful convictions. I agree with that, especially especially when they're keeping out exculpatory evidence like that. Selena Stoll says, was there any evidence Zach was ever at RG's?
No, they tried to present that he was based on a hearsay testimony by Sadie of Zach texting her their exact words in exchange when she was at Rosalio's house one night, but there was no one ever there to verify it. They said that he tested, or that the cell phone towers registered him in Kenosha, but that never places him at Rosalio's home.
Right.
That places him in that, maybe he drove past. That doesn't place him there.
Right.
So those are very different.
I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he drove past his home at some point. It's like, this is like a guy who now is starting that to me doesn't mean anything. I mean, it literally doesn't mean anything. If you're hung up on a woman and you know she's now dating someone, you sort of want to scope out what the competition has. That doesn't mean you're stalking. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything illegal. To me, if he did drive past the home there out of curiosity as to, like, you know, does this guy have a lot of money? Is it like a wealthy place? You know, is it like some mansion he's living in or whatever? That, to me, that's not anything. That's just, you know, that's just guys being guys without even being, I wouldn't even call that creepy. I mean, because it's someone he had a relationship with for like 13 years and now is finding someone new. The curiosity sort of, you know, factor, I wouldn't.
And for the record, driving past this guy's home doesn't make him a murderer. That's a huge
obviously
judgment.
Obviously. Does the victim's family believe your brother is guilty, or do they think they just want someone to or do you think they just want someone to blame?
I think they just wanted someone to blame. I think the DA tried to sell it to everybody that he was guilty, which is why they spun so many lies. I think they knew the millions, the literal millions of dollars that they spent to try and convict my brother was all wasted. They knew that they didn't have a case, and they needed to try and get a win, especially after Rittenhouse. They were trying to get a win.
Yeah, because this is the biggest case they had since Rittenhouse. So
that's right. Yeah.
I'm not sure you can get this. You can get to beyond a reasonable doubt when the DA himself says maybe this happened, maybe that happened, about 6 times in closing. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Way more than 6. I think that in 30 minutes time, it was in multiple forms. It wasn't all just maybe, but he had said, like, you know, that you have to, like, take my word for it, or he had you know, asked the jury to believe what he was saying, you know, as opposed to just presenting evidence. And Jen had the count last time I saw. She was the one that was counting it. But in the first 30 minutes that she was listening to his closing statements, it was well over 20 different occasions that he had used a maybe argument, or a believe me, trust me argument, that came up in his closing argument that had nothing to do with the evidence that was presented. It was disgusting.
The phone in the freezer, we covered that. Ani ohevata, that's Hebrew for, well, ohev means, it either can mean I like you or I love you, and I don't know if he's talking to me or to you, but in Hebrew, ohev can mean either. But
I think it's probably this, right? Like,
yeah,
that he's spelling out.
Oh, good one. Well done. Marcel says, came in late, very interested in the case and story. Where can I get more info? So you can go to Facebook, which I attached down below. I'm sure they can get more info about the case there, right? Because when I tried doing research online, I ended up getting the story that the state has been selling, including all sorts of fictional information. So I would recommend you check out the Facebook page in the link that's attached already in the link below. Don't forget that one of Zachariah's clients said the carpet was gone before the murder. Oh,
that's right.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Susan Brown Williamson had testified that the carpet was already gone.
Okay. So I got that. Joe, all the law tubers have convinced me appeals are pointless, but in your opinion, what appeal points does Zach have? So I think we tried covering this. And yes, I do think, you know, Branca is correct, and not to dishearten you because sometimes appeals win. They do sometimes win, and it sounds like you have a lot of strong bases here. But the failure of Gravely to recuse himself here when he could have been an important witness, that's a big deal. The Denny's thing, where there's the inability for them to point the finger at someone who perhaps really should have had the finger pointed at them, that to me is a significant basis for appeal. The statements that were allowed by his daughter with respect to the marijuana growing operation, with respect to the being threatened with a gun,
Other acts evidence. Yeah.
That testimony that came in there, which was emotionally charged and completely irrelevant to any of the crimes that he was accused of committing, was incredibly prejudicial. And then the closing arguments there. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot here of really the closing arguments pushing that, implying that his failure to testify should somehow be held against him by the jury. There's a lot of basis here. So while normally I would say your chances of winning on appeal are 2%, 3%, I think that your situation here is far stronger. Far stronger than you would normally have, and especially when we look in the context of all his evidence to exonerate him. I really hope that you are successful. I don't want to put a number on it, and at the end of the day, numbers are meaningless, because if I said he has a 60% chance of winning this appeal, let's face it, what does that mean when you're looking at one case? Because
right.
It'll work or it won't work. So then, like, what does a 60% chance mean? I could say a 10%, and oh wow, the 10% came through. Or I could say 90%. It's like, oh, the 90% didn't come through. The 10% bad. It's like whatever number I give is kind of ridiculous. But I will tell you that he does have significantly stronger bases for appeal than most defendants have, because this was just awful miscarriage in my personal opinion. I also want to clarify that, obviously, before, in case anyone came in the middle and heard me talking about Sadie as being, and took from that I was saying Sadie did it, or that Sadie was involved. My point to that, about that, I want to be 100% crystal clear, is A, I was expressing opinion, definitely not a statement of fact, and B, there's so little physical evidence that whatever ties you can attach to Zach could equally well be attached to Sadie, as far as the motive, opportunity. In fact, she likely had far more opportunity than he did, based on the timeline you presented there. But frankly, your theory on it sounds much stronger than anything I've heard from anyone. In fact, I probably plan on clipping that out and sharing that, because I thought that was a really interesting breakdown as to your theory as to what happened here.
It makes the most sense with what was found.
Right.
It incorporates all the evidence, all the testimony that was made by the neighbors at the time, during that time frame when they canvassed the neighborhood.
Mhm.
All of those statements of fact, all of those statements that the witnesses made, all corroborated with this timeline that this is what really occurred. So right. it doesn't it doesn't lean into the story, the tale that the state had told.
Right. All right, let's just wrap up here. To be frank, he's not efficient. To be fair, he's not efficient as Murdoch. Well, don't get me started on Murdoch. Joe said it best on Vice's best out would be to point at the door and say, Rosalio is about to walk in. And if the jury looks, that's reasonable doubt. I did say that. Yeah. We've actually recently learned that he's still alive. And in fact, he's about to walk through the door right now. And like, if they look, it's like, why are you looking? You're obviously not sure he's dead even. Why do you think he murdered him? He'd be on reasonable doubt. So anyway, I think that's a good closing note here. I want to thank you so much for joining me and sharing such unique perspective. I'm going to wrap up with one final question here. Like, how do you deal with this emotionally? Like, I hear the passion in your voice, and I can well understand the passion, but like, how do you deal with this, and how is Zach holding up in this terrible situation that he's in?
Truth be told, he was a lot worse for wear before there was this. Before there were people out here that saw the injustice that was occurring in the system against him, because this is not something that happened just this year during the trial. For our family, this has been our family member getting railroaded, and this this manipulation by the DA, the news articles that have been released, the missing persons posts that specifically outlined lies, straight out lies that incorporated my brother's Christmas tree farm, that did all these things, right, damaging to my family. It has been 3 years long, just over 3 years long, from when the first news article was released. So for us, we've been sitting on our hands with our mouths shut because we didn't want to talk about this because his lawyers told us not to talk about this in the public sphere until trial. And now that we have a trial that was publicized, everybody got to see information that was presented. They got to see what the court was doing and how awfully they presented this case, how poor of a case they had, how bad the police had actually investigated this. And the reality is that in this situation, our family has just had to grit and bear the entire time. It's it's estranged from my brother's children. My dad has been able to see them semi regularly, but as far as the rest of us, we've seen them once a year and only around Christmas. Outside of that, we were petrified to even reach out because if we were to reach out and Sadie were to report it to the police that we were reaching out on my brother's behalf, even if we didn't,
Who prejudice him?
it's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So our hands are tied, and we couldn't even maintain a relationship with his children. It is so damaging, especially to my niece in this situation. This
Yeah.
whole thing has been hell on earth for his family, very specifically, and the rest of us being dragged in through this all the way through this whole situation. It was unjust from go. I don't know how exactly, as far as I understood, they chose to interpret the stalking law to be able to arrest him on it in the first place. So they chose to be able to stretch the line of the law in their own interpretation to write the first warrant. And I don't even know that had validity. I'm not an expert. I don't know the letter of the law and the execution of a warrant and how that relates to the law as written. That's not in my wheelhouse. But this has been an awful ride for us all. Zach has been alienated for 2 years. He couldn't speak to Josh or me. It was 23 months after his arrest that they had a gag order on us until after the first mistrial. This has been awful. He was alienated from the people that he was closest to, specifically to try and break him psychologically and emotionally. That's how they treated him. This is an innocent man that they treated, an accused innocent man that they treated this way. So for him, it's been terrible the entire time. He lost about 40 or 50 pounds while he was waiting for trial. That's why he looked so thin when he was brought in. That's why his suit was loose, because he had dropped down to like 170 pounds.
Well,
And I mean that included not seeking medical attention, that the actual jail violated the law in taking away his privileges, not holding court hearings, by putting him in the hole for more than 10 days and never ever having a physician evaluate him. That is all a direct violation of the law in the Wisconsin statute. So the jail violated his rights. The jail violated the law in his incarceration, and he didn't even see trial yet. This is a huge problem. So for him, having all of you out here, all of you that are writing him, messaging him, all the support that we have, people that are reaching out and believing in him, and understanding that he got a raw deal in this case, it means the world to him, and we are humbled by your support. It means a lot to our entire family. Thank you all. I
and if
really do appreciate it.
and those of you who are watching, if you want to support, please, to the extent that you can, the link is down below where you can contribute to his defense, which his bills, I'm sure, are going to continue to mount and mount as he tries to fight this injustice. Which I think anyone watching this and you spend 15 minutes hearing this story, you could start to understand just the levels of injustice that unfortunately Zachariah and his family have to deal with. And I don't know if you're religious people or not. I don't know if Zachariah is religious, but I will suggest, and if you're not, this may sound hollow, but to the extent that you could a lot of people find solace in turning to God. And I'm just going to close here by thanking you for coming here and urging prayers for Zach, prayers for his children, and prayers for your entire family, because I'm sure that this stress is something that really feels unbearable at time. And I hope you guys find the strength to fight through this until justice ultimately prevails here.
Joe,
So,
can I ask you to extend that courtesy to Rosalio's mother and his family as well?
of course, because his family certainly is suffering as well, and I hope that they can find peace and ultimately, satisfaction in finding out what happened to Rosalio and finding out, who's responsible for this entire ugly situation.
It's
Stick
tragedy.
It really is in every possible respect. I thank you for joining me. Stick around for a second. I just want to talk to you after I wrap up here.
Thanks.
I thank you all for joining us, and yeah, justice for Zachariah. Thank you so much. Godspeed.